I'm ready. Well, you're introducing.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube, and welcome to our first Avatar: The Last Airbender live stream from the Thanasis channel. I am
I'm
Reti
ready.
4.
Well, you're
This is
introducing.
Greyjedi 91. Hello,
Hey guys, how you doing?
today we're going to be covering the discussion points and comments that people have left, questions and whatnot, in our announcement video earlier in the week, as well as addressing people who are currently in the live chat now, at the end of the video session, to kind of open up into more of a Q&A session, leaving it live there. So if you want to lead us into the initial comment points people have already raised, Matt, let's get this started.
Okay, have people already asked questions in the chat? Is that what you're telling me?
No, sorry, the comment list have already been given. The guide.
Oh, the ones that people asked earlier in the week?
Yes, early in the week.
Oh, okay. All right, sorry.
Sorry,
Um,
Q&A at the end, guys.
okay, so what these are questions, like Callan said, that some of you guys asked on Wednesday, and we're going to get those out of the way first, because we've had time to think about some of these. So I'll go ahead and read those now. It's in no particular order. This is just the order in which they came in, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no, this is reverse order. This is actually most
As I
recent
pulled them,
comments.
basically, I just went scrolling down and
Yeah.
grabbed them.
Okay. Should I read the names?
Yes, read the names.
Okay.
So people can know who they've got.
Sam 23 Bill. I hope I'm not butchering anyone's name, but Sam 23 at any rate. Have you guys read the Promise graphic novel, and what did you think how it handled the issue of colonies? Personally, the ending felt rushed to me, says the commenter. Um, I don't actually, I don't remember. I know I read those books, but I don't remember that much about them because I didn't really care for them in an overall sense. Callan, you want to refresh my memory on some of that if you can?
Essentially the same with me, unfortunately. I read all of the comics as they came out for the early years. I've probably not seen the latest of the Avatar material. But yeah, essentially I had the same feeling. The ending was rushed for that. The conclusion of the whole moving the colonies towards the Republic City stage, for me, felt more like a attempt at bridging between the two series rather than telling a story that needed to be told by itself. I liked the idea and I liked the setup, but the ending and the execution was to me it was bogged down more on the kind of character stories they were trying to go for, and I didn't personally enjoy those stories by themselves. So it was like a distraction from the main idea that damaged the execution on top of execution I was already not enjoying. So yeah, that's my my 2 cents on that material. And again, I don't remember most of it because of the lack of an impact it left, except for some of the
Um,
headlines.
Now here's sorry, I gotta close something there. That's distracting me. Okay, there were several different graphic novel sort of collections. Which one is The Promise? Like, I'm not even sure which one that is.
Pretty sure it's the first,
But I mean,
but please, by all means, people correct
what's
me if I'm wrong.
what's the arc of it? Like, does that get into Zuko's mom, or is that like a completely different
So
one?
Kudman was the second, I believe, with Toph and the Metal Bender stuff becoming in the last. The first one was, if I recall correctly, the promise that Zuko made towards the other nations and how he was going to deal with the Fire Nation moving forward. I think, but I could be just shooting myself in the foot right now.
Okay.
It's
No,
basically it's
it's
been a
just
while for us both, guys. We were never really
yeah.
attached
The
to
only
the
reason
comics, essentially.
Yeah, the only reason I even like singled that out was because there are aspects of like some of the comics that I enjoy, but even if I was to pull some of those aspects and like cite them, I'm not sure which arc they even correlate to. So I could praise things or criticize things that have nothing to do with the promise. You know what I'm saying? Um, so yeah, but like in general, those comics just I don't feel like they're really they don't feel the most natural successors to the show to me at all. But I should reread them, and perhaps we should review those properly on this channel one day. Actually, that might be the best way to
Definitely,
go about it.
definitely, we need to go and back over them and give them a good reread before we judge anything too harshly. But yeah, that's essentially our
Okay.
opinion on it because we are just too out of the loop with those ones.
Yeah. So we'll get back to you with the proper answer one of these days, guys. We'll review those. So next question, same commenter, Sam 23. Are there any side characters, excuse me, you guys want to know more about? You want me to give my answer first,
Yeah, yeah,
or
go ahead.
are you? Personally, I always wanted to see more of Ko, the face stealer. If you don't know who that is, I can't imagine anybody in this chat wouldn't know who that is. But he shows up at the tail end of season one or book one, and he's a spirit, and he's just a really interesting character. And he concludes his meeting with Aang by saying, "We'll meet again." And when a character like that says something like that, it tends to have weight. But we never actually saw him again, and just to sum up my reasons for wanting to see more of him was that there was actually a lot of theories swirling around Amon's identity back in the day when season one of Korra was first airing. And one of the ones I really liked was the idea that Amon had been granted his abilities by the face stealer in exchange for his face, hence the mask. This is not my fan theory, it's one I read. I just enjoyed that. But regardless, that's clearly not what happened, of course, as anyone who's seen the show could attest. But fan theories aside, Ko was always an engaging and memorably creepy character for me that I want to see more of. So that's my answer.
I actually had the same answer. Two of the
Oh,
comments we've
really?
got.
Yeah.
Yeah, two of the comments we've got. I point towards Ko because he is such a fascinating character, both in idea and design and execution. I'm of two minds because I almost don't think he really had a place turning up later in the story of Aang, or at least in the series in the main story we have contained. But at the same time, it could be if they wanted to work it in. Just because it's kind of unnecessary for the overall journey that the group were going on, and the characters that were going on. It doesn't mean that they couldn't have used some of the book 3 filler episodes
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
kind of tell a sort of mini arc in there somewhere. But he's a character I would like to see come up again. Beyond him, though, outside of the ones that I wouldn't really want to see more of, I would have just wanted to see a few changes in them. Like, for example, Leader of the Dai Li, he was kind of cut off
Oh,
at the end and never really finished off
Long
properly.
Fang.
Wong Feng, yeah.
Yeah,
Dong Feng.
Yeah.
I didn't really, I didn't feel the loss of him not having the proper conclusion to his story, but at the same time, it did feel like it was a bit cut off. Like there was a story that wasn't concluded there. But apart from things like that, Ko was the only one that really stood out to me as a side character that I would love to see just any story told well with him.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Like Ko is a character that I legitimately wanted to see more of because I found his presence engaging and he was an interesting character, whereas Long Fang just sort of fell off, like they just stopped addressing him. So I get that. I agree with that actually. That's actually if I was really going to rewrite the series, there's not that much I would change because the series is so great, but I would definitely give Long Fang a proper send off, especially because I don't want to get in trouble here, and say the wrong thing, but he's the only one. He's the first person that comes to mind as somebody who actually killed somebody in the show. You know what I mean? Is he the only one? He's not the only one, is he? But he's the first one that comes to mind.
Kind of stated out. Well, I say stated outright. It was never really clear, but but compared to the other ambiguous ones, they make a point of focusing on the question of whether or not he did. I can't think of anyone else.
According to the creators, Jet is dead, and that's like a long since, so he killed somebody, or at least fatally wounded them. And for somebody to do something like that in a children's show, and for him to not really be given his comeuppance by one of the heroes or victims,
or Azula specifically.
No, well,
he kind of did.
That's
but the final.
No. But that's exactly what I was talking around, though. She's a villain, and she dresses him down, and he deserves it, and she's right. But that's not justice. That's just Azula being Azula. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I meant more from a story perspective than the actual kind of in-universe side. But I definitely see what you're
but he needed to be either executed, thrown in jail, robbed of his bending ability, something needed to happen to him, and none of that I know of was explicitly stated to have happened. Other than that, he just lost his status as the leader of Ba Sing Se, basically.
I just felt like there needed to be some sort of small wrap up at the end. But yeah, apart from that, I again agree. Ko is the first one that comes to mind, and again he'll turn up again in a bit for all the other questions, for much the same reasons.
Okay, so we'll move on to our next question. Or do you want more time to think about the biggest change one? Or we can go to a different question and come back to that one. We can come to that one last if you want.
To that one. That one's a big one.
Okay, so we'll jump over that one. Next one is well, it's about the graphic novels again,
Yeah.
which is your
Did
favorite? I'm not sure. We'll revisit them. It's Nur Yovel Studios. I'm sorry if I said that wrong. We'll address the graphic novels properly one day in an episode all their own. The same person, Nur Yovel Studios, asks, worst Avatar character, one for Legend of Korra, one for Avatar The Last Airbender. Doesn't have to be a main character, but the character has to be in more than 3 episodes.
See, the
Hmm.
trick here,
I'll
the
let
trick
you
here
I'll
is
let
that
you take that one
worst
first.
when it comes to Avatar doesn't mean bad. So
It's
you
true.
almost don't want to point it out because then you make it sound like, oh, I'm heavily critical or I have massive problems with this character. When really you just mean that they were like a least favorite for you. Excuse me.
Um, do you want to take this one first,
I
or
don't
do you
know.
need more time?
I don't know. To
I
me,
guess.
I couldn't point to a specific one that stands out as my absolute least, favorite, I worst when it comes to Avatar. But there are a few that stand out as ones that I either don't particularly care about or care about least by a significant margin, that I can put them into this sort of category. First example for Avatar for me would be someone like May, who I don't have a problem
Right. Yeah.
with, but I almost wouldn't care if she just vanished, or I would have preferred her to be changed in some ways in certain scenes and stuff. Nothing
I
to do with the execution of the character. She's so by design for the personality that she has, bland to me, compared to some of the other characters.
see the thing about she occurred to me when I was thinking about that, and I took her off my list. Like I decided she's not the worst character, if for no other reason than um, I don't mind her. She's just not particularly strong, like, and it is like her personality thing. She doesn't even have a dark humor to her. There's just really not much going on there. In the way that even I'm not crazy about the character of Eska from Legend of Korra, but there is something there. I can understand like that is a character at the very least. May is very well. Her aura is gray and dingy, right? Like Ty Lee said. And she's important because she's a love interest, but she's just not as important as I would want her to be. She's kind of like Ginny from Harry Potter for me.
See, that's one of the things that makes her stand out as being more deficient than as a character than say Ty Lee, because she, with the exception of the personality differences, she doesn't really. In fact, she stands out more than Ty Lee in the story. But because she has more of a presence on screen for the characters involved, her deal with Zuko is so much more. Is supposed to be so much more significant to the the primary characters, unlike Ty Lee, who really doesn't have anything to do with anything in the grand scheme compared to everyone else, obviously. Um,
Yeah,
because of that, her deficiencies stand out more to me, and make
yeah, I
I
agree.
focus in more on her as a result. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that regard.
I I, pre- I prefer Ty Lee because Ty Lee has an actual personality and, in my opinion, a more memorable fighting style. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So Ty Lee, I can think of more scenes. Like May, I can't remember even much of what she says. But again, that doesn't mean she's a bad character. She just sort of stands out here. Um, if it doesn't have to be a main character and just somebody who shows up in more than three, I might settle on. I'm not even sure if this character qualifies. Is the Earth King in more than 3 episodes? I think he
I
is.
think he is. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I,
definitely is. Yeah.
I've never really, I don't know, just his presence in the world, the whole way that that character was, and the fact that he doesn't really go on an arc. I've always felt like he was kind of a weak character for me.
I definitely agree. He's there could have been a lot more going on with him than there was, but I can understand why they tried, or if it was a conscious decision anyway. I can understand why they moved away from that and focused more on the others, because
Yeah,
that particular arc that he comes into is hectic,
I
both with plot and character development of the main
yeah.
gang.
Oh
So
yeah, yeah. I mean, I really had to think about this, like try to come up with something I was disappointed by, and I'm not truly disappointed by that, but just if it's like a character that's weaker than the others, I guess he's my choice, But it's not like he's a terrible character or anything like that.
yeah, yeah, it just stands out for his lack of oomph. But for the
Now,
Korra side, which is a bit
yeah, there's
further
there's
ahead,
a lot
yeah.
more there's a lot more candidates for this for a variety of reasons. I don't know if you picked the one that you just hate the character, or the character you thought was just poorly realized and could have been a lot more. I'm not sure which route to go with that.
An example of someone who immediately comes to
Um,
mind as I could have really done without is Milo. His
oh, see,
particular brand of fart joke just was dead on arrival for
but
me. and kept
I could
reoccurring.
I'm not I don't like that kind of humor myself, but I have watched this show with children, and I guarantee, like, you just have to take my word for it. That gets a huge laugh. So it's not he's. And I'm pretty sure he's like a niche fan favorite. You know what I mean? So it's not like the same quality as somebody like May, who I can't imagine anyone really liking May. I know that there's people that adore Milo, for better or worse, but that's like, idiosyncratic to you. And
Yeah,
again,
yeah.
we all have our
Oh yeah, I
opinions.
definitely understand that it's not
Uh,
aimed at me. He was never supposed to be someone I
yeah,
was interested in. But at the same time, to me, I feel
he
like they could have gone a different route for
see he
the
doesn't.
particular brand of humor that he
Yeah,
brings.
he's so not my favorite character, but he's not a character that bothers me. I think more about, again, not to be like I have a bias against the Earth Kingdom, but the Earth Queen, I despise her. Like, yeah, I get you're supposed to, but she made it was too easy to despise her. She was unrealistically terrible. She was like Umbridge from Harry Potter.
And more so for me, like she had no. She was every bad ruler in the cartoon ever, kind of thing, wrapped into one. For
Yeah,
me, the big thing that bugged me about her is that I always had in mind that the obvious direction to take a bad queen or king from this era of the Earth Kingdom would be someone more like Tywin, who is not like in design completely, but in terms of original origin. Like Tywin hated his father because he was incompetent and he nearly destroyed the family name. I would have gone with the next generation with this Earth Queen being bad because she's paranoid and personally takes control of the daily and is all like, okay, my dad was incompetent, I have to make sure everything works fine, and that's what leads more down
she
down the tyrannical rule.
she, uh, she should have been a Kuvira basically.
Yeah,
But
effectively, yeah, and
yeah,
that's why I would have
yeah.
I would have changed it. I would have focused the story on that kind of front, which makes us now as a
Now,
particularly bad one for me because
yeah,
of the wasted potential.
I do want to say I feel like I'm kind of dodging this question with Korra because the Earth Queen, she's not. She's almost not a character. Like, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
she's a
Like, I can't.
caricature for sure. Like, there's no
Yeah, I
depth to
can't.
her.
So I want to give some. I guess if you talk about like the main group or like one of the mainstays of the show, Mako, I've always felt is like an underwritten character. Um, he's bland, and that's just there's no getting around that for me. I there are things I like about him. I think he's a badass. Like, don't get me wrong, and some of his fights I think are among the most well animated in the show. And he doesn't piss me off like every time I see his face. I just he could have been so much more, especially because with him, you're going to do this. You're going to think of Zuko, like, like when you think of who to compare the various characters to, and he's just not even close to even being a quarter of as interesting as Zuko was.
Definitely, yeah. He's definitely one of my least favorites in the show. Again, though, pretty much everything I have a problem with in Korra, because I love the show overall. The stuff I had problems with is almost unilaterally the things I think this should have been done better. This could have been done better. This could have been absolutely amazing and just wasn't. In these particular isolated examples, Mako being one of them. He, as you said, he is bland. He mostly just moves through the story as a kind of plot MacGuffin that he has little
No,
moments, but for the majority of the time, he's
yeah,
just the firebender that's
he's
standing there.
he's an important character. He gets things done. He's just not all that engaging. And I think to cap it all, his namesake. I mean,
Mm.
he's just not worthy of the name.
Yeah, very true. For sure.
Um,
Apart from those, though, I
so
can't think of any more major ones for Korra that stand out above the rest.
yeah, no. Well, I mean, I'll
Off the
get
top of our
into the.
head, anyway.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into this. We'll get into this when we review Korra, but I think if you talk about main villains, Unalaq is definitely like my least favorite, even though he's one of my favorite fighters. But we'll get into the reasons about that later on. So consider that a kind of tease, I suppose. Because he swirled around in my mind, like when I was thinking about this. Should we move to next
Yeah,
question?
yeah,
Or
move
did
on
you
to
have
the next
anything
one.
else to?
No, I have
Okay.
nothing to add. That was my close up.
So Dorf Johnston asks, "What do you think is each character's greatest weakness?" Well, we'll be here all day.
Yeah,
Each
it's a
character.
really good one.
Um,
We'll stick to the main gang because otherwise we will be here all
sure.
day.
Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. We'll keep it. Do you want to include Toph to that or
Yes,
not?
yes, always include Toph.
Okay. Okay. I just because we hadn't reached that point in the show. I
Yeah, fair
just
enough.
wanted to. I didn't want to counter out. I just wondered what you thought.
Mm.
I'll let you start on this one.
Well, It's a difficult one because there are different types of weaknesses for each character in different times in the story. But if we're going for overarching, like predominant, this is the first thing that comes to mind as their core weakness as characters, as people rather, not as like written characters, because these aren't flaws in the character designs. For example, Zuko would be his lack of confidence. He's really kind of crippled by his perception of himself being this talentless, hard-working, but ultimately, having to grind every ounce of skill that he gets out from himself. That kind of holds him back. We mentioned in one of the recent episodes that when he's using swords and he's got the mask of the blue spirit over his face, he's so much more present in the fights. He's dealing out damage way more than he is with firebending against people who should be his superiors, either because they're outnumbering him or because they have more dedicated specialist skill with whatever weapon they're using, and yet he just grinds them up. We don't see that in his firebending until much, much later. And so I would definitely name that as his primary weakness, just that lack of
Should I
confidence.
should I like? I guess we'll let you weigh in on each character, and then I'll weigh
Yeah,
in on the same character. That way, we cover it all
yeah,
in
sounds
one
good.
go. I agree with you, but I would tack on to that. I suppose what's that word? Jingoism, like a sort of like ultra naive form of patriotism, like
Mm.
he's been raised with this idea that what his father, what the Fire Lord, what the Fire Nation does and says and thinks is all correct, and he really has to grow out of that because it's only after he does that that he really becomes his own person.
It's one of my favorite things about the character. Actually, is that moment when he's talking to his father and he is pointing out,
Yeah,
what an amazing lie that was. That is like the moment where he's obviously realized this beforehand, but that's the moment where we see it kind of fall away and how much of an impact that has on the character moving forward. How much that cultural veil being lifted redefines him as a
yeah,
character. It's definitely
yeah.
something
So I
very cool to
think that
watch.
yeah, that sort of, and I think that weakness is the one that sort of um what's the word, like permeates all his other ones, you know what I mean? Like that's sort of what drives him to fall prey to his other weaknesses in the end.
Mm.
So that's the main one for me.
Yeah, I completely agree. When he opens up and starts looking at the rest of the cultures, it helps kind of clear his mind from the problems he's been having overall. Um,
Hmm.
but as
So
for some of
next,
the other characters,
how about
Katara
Aang?
or
Or
Aang.
okay,
Right, let's go
okay,
for Aang. Let's go for
Qatar.
Aang first. What do you have to say on Aang?
Aang's easy. Aang's easy because he's like Toph kind of calls it out. You know what I mean? Like his whole deal is an unwillingness to sort of deal directly with conflict. He's always looking for a way around it.
Hmm. He won't meet a crisis head on unless he absolutely has to. Either a loved one being in danger or his sense of duty overriding his unwillingness to dive headlong into conflict, which is based on his virtues. This is a weakness that is born of his merit, but
Yeah.
at the same time, it's still a weakness. It's something that gets in the way. The only time and the other thing I would add to that is that the other times we see the cracks form outside of his duty calling him is when, because again he is 12, his emotions get in the way. Appa being taken from him, for example, is a moment where he loses control. And I can definitely see that emotional imbalance at that stage of his life being a very significant weakness to note.
Yeah, that's the most human thing there is about him, I
Mm.
suppose.
The fact that he comes from this culture of emotionless, not emotionless, but emotion
Enlightened.
restrained, enlightened, yeah, about people who trying to leave that kind of those worldly concerns behind as best they can, and the fact that he hasn't and never will, partly because he's the Avatar, partly because he's Aang. It's it's a significant part of his character, and definitely something that
Yeah.
can be used against him, as we see.
But it's cool that, and we'll get into the reasons why, but I'll just say this and we can talk about it when we get there in our review of the show. I feel like he fully sort of circumvents his weakness, like in by the end of the show, like as of the end of the finale. I think that he's not a slave to that weakness of his anymore. You know what I mean?
Mm, completely agree. It's definitely something he grows out
But
of.
yeah. So that's part of his arc, I suppose. Next is Qatar, since you mentioned her
Yes,
before.
yeah. Her is with Katara. It's more of a mix of pulling herself out of the cerebral side of things, but at the same time not falling too far into the emotional side. She's one that kind of flits between either too much thought or too little, given any specific situation.
Which is sort of like water.
Yeah,
Like
precisely. Yeah, the push and pull.
she's either ice or water and push and pull. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
she's either everywhere and all over the place, or she's just like this. She's very firm on like this is the way to do it, and very stubborn.
Extremely stubborn. She has to really be thrown. Something has to be really thrown in her face for her to realize when she's in that particular type of mode. Again, it is very much on off with her. She can be high minded and almost
Yeah,
enlightened
and
aware of a situation.
it's
But then if she's too heavily emotionally involved, she'll just go into that kind of that mama bear
it's
mode that she has.
it's really appropriate that her weakness is also a strength with that push and pull thing because her stubbornness is what drives her to sort of be like the hero or the activist or the person that stands up and makes a speech or decides to help this town that nobody else is or what have you, like all her big ones,
Hmm.
or or to call out the northern water tribes
Cultural weaknesses.
sexist, yeah. Yeah. So so I mean it's weird, like it's not always a weakness, but it's definitely not always a strength, so there's that.
Mm. It's a very interesting part of her character, and as you said, I like how it ties with the waterbending ethos. It works really
Yeah.
well, especially considering
And
all of
then
these moments tend to tie into her actual learning experience.
yeah, absolutely. And then we have Sokka.
Sokka's difficult to peg because
Yeah.
his weaknesses are almost
Sokka
not his
is
fault most of the time.
Sokka is cursed, I think. Like,
Mm.
like he is he's just doomed like to not fail at everything, but definitely to struggle, but not as stylishly as Zuko does.
Yeah,
Shall we say.
Zuko's
Yeah.
got this big, dramatic, tragic, epic story kind of curse that's weaving through his character arc. With Sokka, it's just that, like, I'm going to put this stick in front of you and trip you over, and then I'm going to take your sword and throw it off the cliff, and I'm going to have the
So
stumbling
those
block. Stumbling blocks keep coming up within his story, and part of who he is, and part of the reason we love him is the fact that he thinks around them, he overcomes them, he
yeah.
charges through them.
I I guess because he's a skeptic that lives in a world that where mysticism has some legitimacy. So it his skepticism like serves him well, like when he's right, but when he's wrong, he's really wrong.
Mm.
So kind of like Katara, it's one or the other. It's either a strength or a weakness, but it's the same straight. It's the same trait.
I think he has a less, with the exception of the sexism early on in the series, which again is an example of something he quickly drops.
Yeah, they
Um,
wrote that out. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. But it also kind of fits his mentality because he has a lot of small problems that he gets over very quickly. His core character allows him to recognize flaws and get around them with however it happens to be in the specific situation that's happening. He's like, oh, I can't fight this type of person. I'll learn how to. Oh, I'm being sexist and I've just been proven that my entire argument is wrong. I'll learn. These things are something he gets around very quickly and overcomes, and that's kind of the main person who is the character. His greatest weakness is what feeds his strength. If we can call horrible bad luck a weakness, which narratively I suppose we can.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, he does. I'm trying to think. Like most of what he goes through is horrible bad luck, as you say. But there's a few times where he definitely brings it on himself,
Oh yeah,
and almost every time it's funny because it's called out. And first of all, we could think about the cactus juice thing, and then licking the wall of mysterious honey,
yeah,
or just ooze because I don't think he knew what it was. But yeah, so that's Sokka for you. And then lastly, since we're just doing the main gang, Toph, I suppose.
yeah. Toph's weakness is that she refuses to acknowledge weakness 9 times out of 10. All of the problems she has, which aren't many because she wasn't designed to be an extremely deep character. They kind of dip in below the surface on specific moments, especially tying her to other characters and their problems. But we don't get like this big arc for her. She's one of the not shallow because there's a lot to her. There's a reason she's my favorite character, but and it's not just because she's absolutely awesome, but because they don't have like these great conflicts for her to go through and overcome. They kind of just acknowledge them and have part of her character be that she doesn't confront them, which is kind of ironic given
Yeah,
the fact that her earthen roots should mean she wants to smash straight through them. But she's very much an airbender. In contrast, she points out to Aang that he's doing it, but she's constantly evading her problems, which Katara calls out. These are like little things that come up, but she doesn't acknowledge them, and that's her biggest weakness: the fact that she won't go through that emotional struggle. She'll just stick with the world of the physical.
yeah. I've made the argument before that Zuko for me is the character that really truly goes on an actual arc, and like that's why he's commonly regarded to be the best character. And in fact, I think that whether he's your favorite or not, I don't really think that it can be legitimately disproved that he is. You know, like that to me is just fact. He's the
I
best
completely
written
agree. Yeah.
character. And Toph to me is the character the most that just sort of arrived fully formed. So I get like I get what you mean. She's not shallow. I know what you mean. She's not even not complex. You know what I mean? I don't know.
She's
She's not
got
overly simplistic.
Yeah, she's got complexity. They're just not advertising it in every single like story arc like they are with the others. They're not
Yeah.
diving into it. They're acknowledging
She
that she has things about her, but they're not focusing on it. You're just gonna see
yeah.
what is there below the surface.
She changes the least, and in some sense that's almost appropriate for her. But at the same time, it's like this sort of rigid, sort of stubborn, like you say, refusal to sort of address every problem at its root and more just deal with like sort of the consequences in her way because that's easier.
Mm.
Even though she preaches against that in some ways, like you
Yeah,
say.
yeah, it's ironic. It's one of my favorite things about her.
That's people.
Yeah,
People are
yeah,
ironic in that way. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So it's realistic in that sense.
yeah.
But that's there's a great many interesting characters, and of course we're not going to be talking about fan favorites like Azula here because we don't have time. But yeah,
Apart from anything else,
that
Azula
that
has a
was a
comment coming up later, so and this
yeah,
is an
that's true.
eccentric one.
But yeah, that's true. Yeah, we have one coming up very soon actually. But that was a good question. I like that one. So let's move on to the next one. I do not know how to say this name. Kyle, that's the easy part. Boudouin? Boudouin?
Budwan or Budoing. Yeah, one of the two.
Okay.
Apologies if I'm
Kyle, you
butchering
know who
that.
you are. Kyle B, you know who you are. Um, what is your favorite aspect of the art style and your absolute favorite piece of imagery in the show? Ooh.
It's really difficult.
I know that my favorite aspect of it, I could tell you that. My favorite, because there's lots of well animated shows. But and there's some that I like that don't do this. There's some very stylized shows out there like Samurai Jack and so forth. But the fact that they actually used a martial arts consultant to make their movements realistic, which doesn't even cover it. Like realistic is too general a term. Like I want a better word for it, but I can't think of one. They actually choreographed this animation in a way that, to me, I've never seen it done with such specificity and alacrity and just beauty before, in my opinion. Or in my experience. There might be some anime out there that I don't mean to offend by my ignorance of not knowing how great it is. But for me, this is like the greatest I've ever seen in
I,
that regard.
I completely agree. I made a note of similar vein. That the simple kind of intricacy of the animation lends itself so well to the kind of flowing movements of the combats and not even the combat, just the grace and acrobatics of each moveset in the show. The fact that they took the time to animate, sleeves flowing in just the right way,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
as they, release a gout of a gout of fire, or they'll leap and do a swing, and you'll see like the again, just almost the cloth is a big focus of it, actually. The leg cloth will just gently swerve as they do a huge leap in the
Yeah.
air. Little details like that, and they're all over the place. They stand out. And the Antoine's mentioned the expressions as well. The facial
Yeah.
expressions.
Yeah.
Everything's very dynamic. They hit the right beats and they kind of
For
go extreme in the right moments, but they keep everything toned back and more
yeah,
realistic for the somber ones.
yeah, for example, just an example of like kind of what I'm talking about or what we're both talking about and like how you can juxtapose it with something else that I grew up with. When I was a kid, when I would get off school, I would watch Dragon Ball Z. Okay, like it would be like on Toonami or whatever. They'd show that for an hour every day. And when you see somebody in their flying, say, like they're just flying, um, uh, when a firebender does it, like Ozai does in the finale, they actually choreograph every movement. He's actually doing like martial arts. They're just happening in midair, if you know what I mean. So it's just going that extra step and making it visually engaging and interesting to me. I just love all that stuff. And that says nothing about like the beauty of like the environments or like the architecture that they decide to go with and all this other. It's really hard to settle on what exact or even just the color palette, which is sort of unique. Um, it's hard to pinpoint exactly what it is, but my favorite aspect is definitely just the motion, the life, like the genuine sense of animation to all that.
Completely agree. Yeah, and then the comment asks about specific, imagery and visuals that come
So
to mind.
tough.
There are
Yeah.
so many. For me,
Oh,
most of
I'll
them.
pick.
Oh, sorry, you go
I was
first.
gonna say let's. I was gonna say to make it just to be fair to us because there's so much we could pick. Let's isolate that to just book one. What's your favorite image from book
Oh
one?
God, I could. That makes it more difficult. If anything. One of
Is
the big
it
ones. One of
like
the
I
big
don't
ones that
think
comes
so.
to
It
mind.
doesn't make sense.
Big, big one that comes to mind is the gripping of the reins of Appa as Aang goes into Avatar mode, mirroring the parallel of Zuko grabbing the arm of his comrade on the crewman on the ship. Um, the,
Yeah,
for me, the Avatar state in general is a big one.
I was gonna
Instantly
say
recognizable, instantly, the eyes and the arrow lighting up. Always accompanied
yeah.
by an epic moment of extreme weight in the story and the character development. Um, always comes
I
to
have
mind.
I was gonna say like I'm a sucker for the Avatar state as well. So I'm tempted to say Roku in the solstice,
Mm.
because I was like, I think epic is a way overused word. I never say that, but that was epic.
Oh yeah, I'm
Um,
ready. It's like,
but
oof.
yeah, but then after I say that, I go, something I would just like pause and I would try to draw it. I used to do that. I used to pause cartoons and like try to draw it when I was a kid. And something I tried to draw and failed at drawing many times. One of my favorite images from book one is definitely Aang at the koi pond, and like when he's getting ready to sort of let the ocean spirit sort of control him. He sort of like walks onto the water or whatever, and then like plunges into it. Like that imagery has always stuck with me. But it's really hard to choose just one. I mean, that's
Oh
like,
yeah, you can't choose one. There's so many of different types for one thing. Um,
yeah.
so another example, because again, I had more coming to mind from the other books, with book two being my particular
I
favorite.
was trying to make it easy. I was trying to make
Yeah,
it easy, but like, yeah, yeah.
the
But go
the
ahead. Yeah,
cosmic avatar, when he's trying to release the chakra points,
yeah,
that
yeah.
is a series classic. Especially when they brought it back in Korra, having it kind of be a core part of the story. The one of the things that I always remember is the way that it kind of slumps and falls away from the kind of the bridge that he's walking on when he steps away and and makes the decision to go back for his friends. Um, it it has a lot of power to that kind of imagery. But there's so many. There are combat
There's too
moments,
many. Like,
too
yeah,
many of two
it's
different
too,
types to bring up a
yeah,
specific favorite.
yeah,
But that
yeah.
kind of thing sticks with me.
Yeah, it's that's not a fair question. It's like the riddle game with like with Gollum, not fair.
Mm.
But anyway, so I hope we answered that question well enough. So we'll move on to the next one. Blue Hero 96. If Avatar was licensed by Lego, would you buy it? Not me personally because I don't collect Legos, but if there were Legos like that in the world, I think the world would be better off for it. So, yeah.
I'm not sure it would lend itself particularly well to Lego personally. There are certain.
But doesn't.
Well, sure. I mean,
I
of course, yeah. No, it would work. Don't get me wrong, but I think like compared to other things, Star Wars, Harry Potter, the non-themed ones for one. I think like
you're telling me there's a kids would go crazy if you got to build an air temple.
don't get me wrong. Don't be wrong. You could do it, but to me, I just think that it's not got the just off the top of my head, for example, the equipment. Most of the characters don't have particularly unique, standout equipment that would be like, oh, this is not just a different other theme Lego set. There's not that much that kind of stands out on that front. But I'd absolutely be interested in seeing it. I just wouldn't
I'll give
point
you
to
that one.
Avatar as an example of something that, that's what we want to do. That's one we want to focus on. There are other things I'd go to first. But I'm like, I
Give
don't
you that
collect
one.
Lego anymore, obviously, but I have all of my old sets, and I'm the biggest proponent of it for the younger kids. Because I think it's one of the greatest kind of teaching tools in you can have. Getting someone a set, having them build it the way it's supposed to be built, and then taking it apart and doing whatever they want with it. It's such a good teaching and creative tool. I was a huge fan of Barnacle, from Toa Mata
Okay.
from Toa Mata to the Hordika sets. All of them, love them.
So
Just
you've given one of
wouldn't for Avatar.
your one of your classic complicated answers there.
Sorry, yeah,
Uh,
but I wouldn't
so
have
next,
anything against it.
yeah. So next is Rob George, longtime viewer and multi-commentator or whatever to call it. He's always asking many questions, so we'll answer as many of these as we can. Uh, Number one, Varric versus Sokka in a game of wits. Um, and examples include Pai Sho and chess. I, slash, I don't know. Like in
Yeah,
the
it would
question, it says
depend.
I
We
don't.
haven't seen Soccer in his prime, so maybe he develops a
But I
bit
mean,
more of a.
as they note in the question, this is based on their personalities both being brilliant but hilarious, depending on who you ask, and nuts Southern Water Tribe guys. So I can see the parallel between the characters there. Even though Varric, I have issues with Varric, but we'll get to we will address that in time. I promise you guys. But if like, and it says a game of wits, so not physically because Varric's no fighter. I don't know. It's a draw.
Again, we haven't seen Soccer in his prime, so we don't know how he doubled down on his specific, focused intelligences beyond just the general, like, I have a jolt of inspiration about this thing. Because he's not particularly consistent on his, best levels. He'll come up with an
No,
amazing idea 1 minute and then be a complete moron the next. Whereas Varric comes across a bit
sounds like
more consistently cunning. It's kind of his shtick.
yeah. I guess like, well, Varric seems more cunning, whereas Sokka is more well-rounded.
Mm.
So it's tough, but like maybe Varric, if that's what we just said, I'll just like if I really had to bet, I'd put 51 against 49, in favor of Varric.
But again, Varric is
Anyway,
an adult and Soccer is still reasonably a child. So give him 10 years and I'm sure he'd be just as good, if not better. As with
that's
most of the
just
characters
your
in more
that's
most
just
things.
your shameless Atla bias coming in to admit it. Anyway, so now, who is your favorite character in Atla? Obvious, Zuko for me. Though it's not so obvious because you like an inferior character, Callum.
Hey, I'll admit it. She's inferior in terms of character execution, but Toph has always been my favorite. And
Ah,
it's a common answer. I mean, it's Toph,
yeah,
but she is
it's the
transcendently awesome. But the personality and the humor and the what she brings
no,
to the team as a character, I've always really enjoyed. But Zuko,
yeah,
unquestionably the best character of the show for me. And if I was looking at it from a technical perspective rather than just personal intrinsic enjoyment, absolutely Zuko every time.
yeah. I hate to give the impression that I don't like Toph. I mean, she's great. She's in like my top three characters, but from the first series anyway. But she doesn't really have to go through life the same way everyone
Mm.
else does. She like I mean, I guess you could almost say she lived. Yeah, I mean, like there's aspects of her life. There is an aspect of her life that sucks, in that it's her relationship with her parents. But it's not even because they don't like her. It's just because they don't understand her. And if they did, she would have probably the most charmed lifestyle that anybody in the world, in that world, that we've been introduced to at any rate, has led. So yeah, I just don't. There's not a lot of empathy, to engage me with Toph because her life is not that bad.
The,
Like
the,
she's
Compared to the others,
unfailingly awesome.
certainly.
Yeah.
Compared to the others, yeah,
I mean, she's like, forget the fact that she's one of the most powerful Earthbenders that we're ever going to see. That she's got like a hilarious wit and just great lines. She's also fucking rich, like in a way that most people are not. Like in that she's like a Malfoy. You know what I mean?
mm.
Um, just on the good team, basically.
Yeah, no, there are little things about it, like the subconscious stuff with her appearance, the ability to not be able to read. These are little blips that she has. As I said before, of her main story, there are things that it does kind of acknowledge and say, look, there's more to it, but we don't have time for this, so just acknowledge it and think about it in your head, kind of thing. And that definitely shows through. But I can definitely see what I mean. She is kind of untouchable in so many ways, as it's kind of part of her weakness. She doesn't acknowledge her flaws or her vulnerabilities. But yeah, 10-year-olds struggles with sand bending, puts like a few weeks of effort into it, bam, she can create an exact replica of Ba Sing Se with one stomp. This person is not someone who has difficulties in the same way that other characters do. She's the greatest airbender you'll ever see at 10, so just imagine what she's capable of in 15 years' time when she actually reaches her prime.
Do you
It's
say Airbender?
I meant Earth if I said air.
Okay,
Apologies.
all
I
right.
was
I
visualizing
might
Earth
have
in my
just
head.
I might have misheard it, but and also she grew up to be Yoda. I mean, her life
Yeah.
is awesome. So I mean, whatever. Uh, but yeah, that's her. The next question is who has the best character arc in Atla, and why is it Zuko? I feel like we've already touched on that somewhat in this Q&A, and we're slowly answering that as we go through the series. So I don't really feel the need to focus on that question right now,
Yeah, no need to dive back
because
into that one.
we talk about it so often because it's one of the mainstays of why the show is awesome. So we'll move on to the next one, which is, do you find any parallels between Star Wars and Atla? I find parallels between Star Wars and basically everything, I suppose.
It's
So
so
yeah,
suffused pop culture in general. You know, every story will draw something from that tale. I mean, partly because it's built on the hero's journey by itself. You know, that will inherently
yeah.
happen by default. But there are elements. You know, there was a moment I mentioned earlier in the I can't recall. I thought, oh, there's a Star Wars parallel I hadn't considered before, but it's lost to me now. But yeah, there's so many of them that just suffuse the show and all
Suppose
pop culture.
I suppose the most obvious one is again one that's sort of central to. It's not necessarily a part of every hero's journey, but I guess it's a part of any redemption um, story for sure, and most heroes' journey stories. I guess the question of how you decide to acknowledging that on some level you can't choose everything about your destiny, but you can choose how you're going to go about it. You know, like the world is the way that it is, and you can't change that, but you have to take ownership of how you choose to navigate it, and that's what determines whether you are good or whether you suck. You know, and it's in Star Wars. That's thematically been like this very visual, iconic, obvious thing between light and dark. Before we had terms like Sith, for example, like that, it's still there. It's ingrained in that mythos. So as long as that story is being told somewhere, you can find a parallel right there, with any other story that deals with that kind of question.
Absolutely, not much more you can say on it for that one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean, and so that, based on that, there could be thousands of cases where we could say, yeah, this is Outline in Star Wars, but we're not going to go through all those. We can point them out as they come along to us, but that would take up all of the rest of the remaining time for the Q&A if we decide to sit with that question. Next, this is the final question from Rob George. Then we're moving on to someone else. Is Atla anime?
Oh god.
And
Oh god. It's a big
so,
question. That's a divisive, explosive, huge question that we really don't have time to get into right now. Uh, Easy answer. It depends on your perspective. All anime is animation. In It's the Japanese term for it. So if you think that means all anime must be Japanese or something must be Japanese to be anime, then fine. If you think that's not the case and that they could refer to an
see,
American cartoon as an anime, then that's an anime. That's basically the dividing line.
I feel
The
like,
problem is that anime has such a specific aesthetic
yeah,
that defines it, and certain niche tropes that are specifically attached to it as well. That kind of that's what breaks the argument up into this big epic debate that goes on the internet forever and ever.
I feel like it's not. Personally. I feel like it's definitely colored by anime, and I think the creators have and will continue to admit that. And they're not trying to hide it or anything. But it is. I'm not a fan of what I think of as anime because it's not something. It's just not something I grew up watching, and because of cultural differences or what have you, like whatever the reason is, I just can't seem to get invested in the ones that I tend to sample over the years. And part of the reason why Atla and Korra both appeal to me is because they're very much Western storytelling, but just with a heavy Asian influence, like both in terms of like the culture they created for the setting of their world, and as well as the just art style and sound style, presentation style, I suppose I should say. All of that carries a lot of influences and tropes that you'll recognize in. I don't want to use the term classical anime in case it doesn't even exist because there's all these different subgenres in there. But to me, it is not anime, but it's heavily influenced by it.
To me, I honestly don't care whether it is or isn't. So I've never really put much thought into the question outside of acknowledging that other people have. As I said, it depends on your perspective on what you view anime as a classification to be. To me, with the exception of the obvious
I think that's a
aesthetic trope connection. It's just animation from Japan, or not even that, because I don't care if something comes outside of Japan. If something looks and feels exactly like an anime, and you wouldn't even know what it wasn't from Japan, then I would still consider that anime, for example. Which is why I think there has to be from Japan argument is a
do
bit silly,
you do
but
you think that label is attributed to this show?
I
Because
don't.
like,
I don't.
yeah,
That's where I was
yeah.
going with that. That's the key for Avatar. I don't. It doesn't scream anime to me. Heavily influenced by anime, but it doesn't scream anime. And that's not really a line of demarcation to draw on. But it's what you feel when you look at it. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, but either way, it doesn't matter. That's not like a mark against or for the show's
Oh,
quality.
of course, yeah, yeah.
So next question, blacksmith. Oh, like blacksmith. Okay, so like what a lame pun. Anyway, what do you think Wan Shi Tong, the library owl, what would his
Oh
reaction
yeah, this
be
is a
if he saw a
strange question.
computer?
Yeah, if you saw a computer,
Uh,
curiosity, confusion. He's
I
a.
think I imagine that that blacksmith is it feels so weird to say the name that way is uh picturing the owl as feeling like he's like his job has been stolen. Like he's obsolete now.
I guess, yeah. But he never seemed to be that concerned about his job when, in the fact that he wasn't sharing the knowledge with the world. He was just kind of compiling it and keeping it hidden away for the majority of the time. So yeah, I don't know. It would be confusion and interest, maybe. Maybe he'll just smash it and see it as an abomination. I don't know. He's a strange one. That owl.
Yeah. Which is a nice segue into our next question by Edith or Ume, not sure how you say that. What's your favorite animal or creature in Avatar?
To which my answers were Ko and Wanji Tong. It's like yeah.
Oh, you consider them
I mean, you wouldn't really call them just purely
consider
animals because they're spirits and they're sentient. But to me, when I
yeah.
think abstract creatures specifically from Avatar, those two come immediately to mind for whether or not that counts towards kind of
Dude,
classification or not.
they didn't even come to me because they're sentient and sort of shapeshifters and sort of eternal and ethereal or whatever. But yeah, they didn't even come to me. I was thinking of like definitely the animals. For me, I have to go with Appa. Like I'm sorry. Like I would want if I lived in this world, I would want a sky bison. But even if I couldn't have one, I would feel better knowing that sky bison existed. I want to live in that world. So that's my answer.
Can't really argue with that one. As we said in the main series, everyone wants a sky bison. It's kind of like the Millennium Falcon or X-wing from Star Wars. They're the iconic parts of the series, and people love them for a reason. They're just it's a mobile home. You can go anywhere you want and sleep while you're doing it, and they'll take you away. And he's a companion.
And yeah, and they're cute.
GP.
Okay, like you can't. There's just no getting around it. Like I can't. I think even Ozai wants a sky bison. To be honest with you, like he would never admit it to you, but he does. He does.
His personal Zeppelin will have a Appa style head on the front of it.
Uh, okay, this is anime references, and I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation. You should do it.
Where are we up to? Oh,
Right after Edith
Mugen Shampoo 1.
Okay, okay. I get points for recognizing that those are like titles of some kind of anime, but I don't know how to say it.
Mugen is a character from Samurai Champloo.
Every day you learn something. Okay, so here's that Azula question. He or she asks, I want to know your guys' opinion on Azula. I know most people like her, but for different reasons. He is very right about that, or she is very right. I'm not sure. Some like her because she's a cold, calculating, and manipulative bitch. I mean, person. Um, Other people look deeper into her character and like her for the fact that she's the product of this great war going on, as well as her horrible father figure and lack of a mother figure. I just want to know if you guys enjoy Azula just at the surface level, or if you enjoy her for far beyond what's directly stated in the show.
For me, I
Um,
would say both, but there's something
I
I
was gonna
specifically
say,
want to pull out from that comment before we dive into the actual question itself, and that's I disagree with the idea that she is who she is because there's a war going on. I think it has coloured the kind of shape of her, shall we call it insanity, but I don't think that if it was peacetime, she would have turned out as like all a flower and rainbows, and she would have been a lot more stable. I think there is something wrong with her as a person before even getting into the whole martial conflict side of things.
yeah, I mean, I agree with that. It's a raised by wolves thing. Um, I mean, as they point out in the comment, she's her father's daughter, and it's not that some of that is genetic, but a lot of that is just the way she was raised. And I agree. It's both. It's because I don't actually like Azula. And some people I feel like they do. That might seem like a stupid thing to say, like me saying I don't like Azula. It's like, well, she's a villain, dumbass. It's like, but the way some people comment about her, I imagine you know what I mean.
Mm.
Like it's almost like they identify with her as a character. Um, am I crazy? Do
No,
you know
no,
what I'm
no. I
talking
definitely
about?
agree. There are people who see the emotional. The thing I think that most people latch onto when they think about her in retrospect, and the thing is, the reason why I understand that perspective is that mirror scene, that breaking down and she's broken and she's
Yeah.
sad, that tends to leave a mark that kind of overlays the crazy mentality that comes
See,
before that.
I
Even
think
with
you're
the
being
craziness comes
generous.
afterwards. I don't
I
think
think you
that my myself lean that way. I definitely felt a lot during that scene, but I wouldn't say, oh, that she's sympathetic now, she's pitiable, she's fine. I wouldn't say that, but that I think heavily colors people's perspective on her. They see her as this. They see her the suffering in her more than the suffering she causes in others.
Yeah, but people sort of laugh like when she sort of laughs off the fact that she's a monster and that she knows, or that her mom
It,
thought she was and she knows that. You know what I mean?
it's actually the favorite line
Um,
from the entirety of the series for Azula. Like to me, that is Azula right there. That's the perfect encapsulation of her. I mean, I could
but see,
complain that my mum thought I was a monster, but I don't really care. She was right, of course, but it still hurt. That kind
but
of
that's
thing
what I
was perfect for her.
but that's what I mean is like in your head canon, did she not show them her real emotions there? Like, was that like a lie?
Oh no, I definitely think that hurts. She was actually being open, but she was hiding it um, in
Right.
like in a
Yeah, and
way of
that's what, but
nonchalance.
there's people who take that moment as it's given. You know what I mean? Like that is who she is. Like that mask that she puts up. Um, and to me, she's not likable at all. And she relishes so much in being conniving and manipulative and just better than everybody. That she's entertainingly horrible. And so I enjoy watching her. I wouldn't change her at all. Okay, I want to make that clear. I'm not saying she's a bad character or that I want to change her. I like Ozai. I enjoy her because of the effect she has on those close to her, namely her friends and her brother. I don't enjoy her so much. Like she's horrible.
Here's a question for you then: do you think 10 years, 15 years after the story is finished that she is redeemed, or could be at least redeemed?
I doubt it.
See, because I definitely think, I mean, with what we know of the comics, there's definitely more to be told before this happens, but I think that she could be. I think she's definitely on the side of broken but fixable. And
She,
if she ever acknowledges that, because there's the moment when she stops, when she rages in the chains and just fire breathing, and like she at that moment she has gone from I don't care to hold up my mask anymore. I don't care who sees me like this. I'm in pain and I'm just going to rage at the world. The moment that happens and she's dropped that mask, yes, she picks it up later and puts it back on as she should, as a character and a person, but I think the fact that she's done that gives her the chance, if given the right stimulus, to redeem herself, even in the eyes of
she,
herself. She's never going to be like a
uh,
wonderful good person Zuko style, but I feel like she could be functional
she,
and reined in a bit.
she, in my view, she takes too much enjoyment in evil. Like prior to that, for me to think of her as being remotely good or even neutral. Like I mean, like neutral, you'd have to work like crazy to get to that point, Azula. Like don't forget, she would have killed Aang.
Hmm.
You understand? She would have killed a 12-year-old. You know what I mean? with a smile on her face.
To be fair,
She's
she wasn't that much
crazy.
older herself. So if it wasn't like he
Doesn't
was an
matter. That
adult
does
doing
no.
it,
That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter.
fair enough. To me, I think there's the
Like
she.
there's like to me that's like I'm drawing a line in the sand there. Like that is it's beyond this is a war and I need to do this. It's the enjoyment.
Oh,
You
of
know,
course,
like that's
but to
crazy.
me, it
It's
comes
the
from the
cruelty.
to me it comes from the power
See
and the
when you
control rather than the enjoyment of the pain. Although there definitely is there. I
when
think that
you
she would drop that in the future.
no she does enjoy it though. Like like consistently throughout the entire show. Even like when she sort of hoodwinks her father by like giving Zuko the credit and Zuko's like why did you do this? She reveals why she did it. Um like and she does everything but cackle. You know what I mean? Like she's just evil.
Again, I'm on two minds about it. I definitely think she is in that moment, and she is in this for the predominant um,
I
showing of the series. But the moments where
see
she does have those quiet kind of again the campfire scene and the mirror scene, I see someone who could redeem herself.
I I see when I look at Azula, I see somebody more like Cersei Lannister, and you're describing Jamie to me.
Hmm.
But that's, you know, I mean, that's fine. Like, I mean, I'm not
Yeah,
trying to
well, I think this is
sway you.
part of the
It's,
reason. Again, I'm not one of the people who like openly enjoys Azula. My favorite parts of her character are the campfire scene and the mirror scene. So again, I see the appeal in the whole potential of redemption. But and I don't mean again Zuko style redemption. I just mean redemption enough where she becomes functional and she at least is safe. If you know what I
I
mean.
think,
But
I think I think she's damaged goods. I think that
oh, I
she's,
completely agree. But it's whether or not she can be repaired. That's the
I
thing.
don't, well, that's what damaged goods mean. Like, no, is the answer. Like, that's what I think. You know what I mean? But
Fair enough.
that's just me.
But that's
Well,
part
that
of
was
the
your
interest of the
question,
character.
though.
Yeah, that's part of
Yeah.
the interest of the character. You know, I mean, that's why people are still talking about her to this day, even though she wasn't the central focus of the story in any way, shape, or form. Um, and that's just why I can understand people liking her, really, even if I don't myself.
I understand why people do. It's just I don't. It's like they say, like people. I think that there are some people who like her because she's cold and calculating and manipulative,
Hmm.
and almost always wins. And to me, I don't. I've that's like Palpatine fans.
Yeah, I
I'm
was
just not.
literally about to say
I'm
it's the
not
same reason
of.
people love the
I'm not.
Sith.
Yeah, I'm not of that breed. You know, so I just don't understand that mindset. But that's me.
See, that's interesting because I'm not of that breed with the Sith, but I am with
Well,
Zula to an
Zula's way more
extent.
human,
Oh,
but
of
no, it's
course,
not
of
that
course,
weird
of
because
course.
she's. I
But
understand you, like, and I'm. It's not foreign to me. What you said to her about her is not foreign to me. I'm harsher in my view of her redemption arc than you are. But other than that, I agree with what you're saying about her. She's much more human than the
yeah,
Sith is, you know,
she's a very interesting
or than
character, which is impressive given the fact that she's standing
yeah.
alongside Zuko. You know, she's arguably second, third
Uh,
most not developed, but explored in terms of her journey.
Dynamics between the Fire Nation royal family are like that's to me the most interesting stuff, and that's by and large why those conflicts are way more interesting than Aang's mission. You know, Aang's mission is like I got to save the world from like this madman who wants to burn it all down. Zuko and Azula and their family, that's all personal conflict, and that's always, you know, fuel for an interesting story and an engaging one that we can relate to.
Yeah, the stuff I
Uh,
love about the gang's journey is the journey, not the destination. Whereas with Zuko and Azula and that lot, it's both. You know, it's the steps along it and also the ending. I want to see where they go and how they get there. If you know what I mean. So it's kind of
mm.
one has one, the other has both.
So have we covered that?
Yeah,
Is there
yeah, I think
anything
we've
else
gone
you
pretty
want?
in depth on that one. Yeah, I hope that's covered what you
Um,
wanted us to, commenter.
so the next one is the most important question. Carlos Garza asks, who's more powerful, Cabbage Man or Melon Lord?
Depends on your perspective because Cabbage Man goes and creates Cabbage Corp, so he has a worldwide influence on trade, whereas
Uh,
Toph creates a you know police force
well,
and
Melon
is super
Lord,
powerful.
Melon Lord is just Toph, okay? So I mean, they're one and the same. So it's literally Melon Lord is the more powerful, but Cabbage Man, he,
He
what I
speaks to
admire
us
about
on
him
a personal level in such a complex and satisfying way, where Melon
he's
Lord
like
in Persona just maybe it doesn't.
the tenacity and you know persistence, like of the human spirit, like that, like embodied by Cabbage Man, who falls over and over and over again, but always rises stronger for it, until he can like dominate the world with Cabbage Corp. So Melon Lord is more powerful, but Cabbage Man may be stronger. Just so we know, that the question has been answered
It has.
definitively. Watch Face asks, do you think that Iroh was aware that Zuko was or is the Blue Spirit? I'm guessing they're asking that as of season 1 because it becomes plain that he does know that later on.
Yeah, at least at a certain point. I would imagine he's very certain because Iroh. We didn't mention his weakness before, but Iroh's weakness is Zuko. So when Zuko wanders off and disappears and is out of his sight line, while he seems to be nonchalant and casual about it, I'm pretty sure he's keeping a close eye on that nephew that's going wandering off in the middle of the night. So I'm pretty sure he knows. Or at least if not the Blue Spirit, initially he knows that he's going off to do something, and then when reports about the Blue Spirit turn up, he's like, oh, okay, that's what happened, kind of thing. That's my perspective, anyway.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm not entirely sure exactly how or when the Blue Spirit became notorious.
I mean, after
To
his
the point that
breakout
Iroh.
of the Avatar,
Well,
I guess
yeah,
that was
but I
almost
mean,
the point he started getting snubbed at.
eventually, we do start seeing him posted on like wanted flyers, like just like the Avatar, for example. But I'm not sure that Iroh knows that a Blue Spirit is terrorizing the Fire Nation yet. But I'm sure that as soon as he catches wind of that, the fact that that's what's going on, he knows basically. So I agree with you.
I mean, for one thing, there's no way that Iroh doesn't know about Zuko's proficiency with two swords. So, I mean, the fact that they
No, no,
immediately
no.
point
Well,
out he's got two weapons, then that's,
yeah.
he's immediately going to click then.
I mean, he has to know. Prior to the he has to know as of season 1 at some point. It's just not clear exactly when, because that happens off screen, is why it's not clear exactly when that happens, but he knows. Next question from the same person. Would it be possible for you guys to discuss the theory I put forward in the King of Omashu discussion? The theory pertaining to why Bumi was king.
I dropped it
Discuss
down
it
in the
as in.
comment below. So
Oh, okay.
what he actually said was put there as well. I added that in because it was an interesting point that we actually
Well,
responded to at the time.
I guess we'll go ahead and just I'll say this. I think that makes the most sense. As to like what happened there. But do you want to actually explain the situation?
Give a description of it because people won't necessarily have read this one. But his idea being that because the Earth Kingdom was at this point so it lacked a central government in like the truest sense. There were multiple kings and multiple mini nations within the greater Earth nation because it hadn't been unified over the years. So his idea was that King Bumi was King Bumi of his region. So the fact that there was an Earth King of Ba Sing Se didn't really affect that, and everyone else outside of the political, circles just addressed it. Oh, it's the Earth Nation. It's because they use the terms Earth Nation, Fire Nation, and all that jazz. Earth Kingdom, sorry, a Fire Nation, and all that jazz, to refer to almost continental like levels. It's not like the Fire Nation colonies are in Earth Kingdom territory, if you know what I mean. Even though they're not actually Earth Kingdom anymore because they're occupied or they've been controlled for so many years that they're completely Fire Nation in culture, which becomes more of a problem later on in the series, as we mentioned at the start of this. It's just a case of the fact that the each region is controlled differently, and that is why it makes sense. Multiple kings was his general idea, basically. The fact that it hadn't been unified at the time.
Or it was also we asked the question like how is he a king or in the first place if you have a king of the whole a leader of the whole kingdom, and the idea was that Bumi is too smart and proactive to bend the knee to somebody who's clearly not really in power. It's not so much they had problems with the Earth King on a personal level, as much as he wasn't going to let the political situation there dominate what was best for his people. So he may have started off as just the equivalent of like a lord or something lesser, and just become king, because that's what was necessary for his territory to succeed, whereas the rest of the continent was going downhill, which is complete fan theory stuff. But this was like a world building question that came up in our podcast, and this answer seems the most appropriate to us. So yeah, we agree with it, or we like the theory anyway, I should say.
Mm.
If it was part of the show, it would make complete sense.
Absolutely.
So we're getting toward the end of our list. We only have a few more. That we have that one to jump back to though, don't we? About the big
yes.
change. But this is another big one. Aaron Miller asks, "What is your opinion of all the kingdoms, and which one would you guys prefer to be in?"
This one made me laugh because it was one of the earliest comments that came up, and it was almost going to be the topic of the video we're covering this week, just in its entirety, before we thought to put the live stream here. So I was like, well, of course this would be asked. Yeah, where do you want to start? We've kind of just covered the basics of the Earth Kingdom setup. Which would you like to dive into first?
I guess.
Short
no, let's not get into like the history of any of them. Let's just
summation of
which
their
one
main cultural points.
Well, we're all fans of the show here. Everybody knows what it's about. Like, let's just. What are the reasons why you say? Why wouldn't you want to live in Ba Sing Se? Because other than the fact that it's Ba Sing Se, and it's
there is
weird
no war
there.
in Ba Sing Se. Yeah, it's a bit weird. I wouldn't live there because I hate cities for one.
That's right. You don't like cities, yeah.
So I'd be far away from that place. I would be living in Haru culture, Haru country, farmland, sweeping hills, mountainous region, somewhere in the Earth Kingdom, just not the main cities.
Yeah.
The main industrial zones.
How deep can we go here? Can I modify myself to like this is exactly who I want to be and like where I want to be, or is it like if you drop me in and I just have to
go crazy
adhere to? Okay, because there's a difference. Like for example, like if I got to be what I want to be in Avatar world, if I got to live in that world, I would want to be a waterbender. I would not, especially during this time, want to live in the Northern Water Tribe because it is sexist and just sort of ultra traditionalist and cold, and they don't. The Water Tribe people, whether we're talking north or south, don't tend to serve food that sounds very appealing to me. So I wouldn't want to live there, but I would want to be a waterbender. So, that's kind of what I'm saying is like, do I have to drop myself into a spot and stick with just the status quo, or can I go wherever I want? And if I can go wherever I want to live in the Fire Nation, and I want to be a waterbender.
Fair enough. And I would want to be an earthbender or airbender. I can flip-flop from day to day on that one, and live, like I say, in the Earth Kingdom.
And I guess we should talk about the reasons why, because they they sort of asked a question like, why do you want to do that? I talked about my reasons for why I don't want to live in the Northern Water Tribe. There are a lot of good things about it. It's
beautiful for one.
It's a beautiful place, more spiritual than most other places as well, and it's highly respected, even by their enemies, because they're the only territory actually that throughout the entirety of this war isn't actually conquered. Even Ba Sing Se eventually is conquered. But like I said, the cultural differences are things that I don't respect and don't want to be a part of. And it's fucking cold, up there, and I don't really want to live there. The reason I chose the Fire Nation is because I am. If I had to live in this world, and it's this world as of the time of the show, the war isn't coming to me if I live in the Fire Nation. You there, Callan, like you're out in the Earth Kingdom, like you might have a fight on your hands. Me, I'm enjoying my tropical fruit. I'm enjoying the beautiful scenery. I'm enjoying the nice weather, and I'm just chilling out. So that's the reason why I chose that.
Fair enough. For me, I just like the countryside. I like the ability to roam wherever I want, whenever I want, but not having to because I love my home. Plentiful amount of earth. You wouldn't make a very good earthbender if you were stuck in the North Pole because everything's ice. I love the cold, so that wouldn't be a problem with me living up there, but I agree with you on all other points. The culture, at least at this point in the story, and the food, not my style. But yeah, not a big fan of the whole war front. So Fire Nation as a kind of propaganda mill wouldn't want to grow up in that environment. So that's basically the
Oh, but
focus
I
of.
who says I did? I moved
Well, no,
there.
of course, yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing we haven't mentioned at all, which I think we should probably pay some lip service to, is the air
The
nomadic
temple. Yeah,
nation.
I was gonna say.
It's obviously not
Well,
it's not
they
around at this
don't
point,
exist
but
anymore. Yeah, they don't exist anymore. So, it is. I wouldn't say no to living in, say, the northern air temple, which has been converted into like a different sort of settlement, which is cool, but it's a bit isolated. I don't know what life would really be like there, and it might be a little too solitary for me. Um,
you have to be an airbender for a reason. Or at least there's a big reason. The design is built for that. If you're not an airbender, it's going to be very inconvenient for you living up in those temples. If for no other
yeah,
reason, that steers me away. But they are beautiful buildings. If they had a bit more connection to the world around them without the requirement of a glider, then I'd be all for them. But the culture as well, it's a bit disconnected from the rest of the world. They are all nomads and they are well traveled and they explore
yeah,
cultures greatly, but they choose to, after having explored this world, take a step back and keep separated from it, which is not my style.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and I want to say something real quick. This is not related to that at all. But the reason I didn't pick Kyoshi Island to live as like a waterbender is because they're terrorized by a giant sea serpent. I don't need that in my life. So, so no, no, thank you.
Yeah, same for me. The Unagi would not be fun on
It's
a nice
otherwise a
beach
great
day. Yeah.
place. So it's otherwise a great place,
But
though.
again,
I just,
isolated. You have to take a ship to get anywhere, which I wouldn't be a fan of. I like to be able to
but
walk over that hill and expect there to be
if I
another hill.
was if I was a great waterbender, I wouldn't need no ship.
True, true. Yeah, there'd be that going for you. But yeah,
So
that's basically it for those.
yeah. I mean, I feel like saying that we'll do like a proper video about this where
Oh,
we talk about
absolutely,
like
absolutely.
the history and culture and just one of my favorite things about again the art style is sort of the differences in the way that people were rendered, just on an artistic level, like when you like the eye colors, for example, and like in their clothing and garb and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot to talk about. Like when we talk about what's our opinion of the different nations, I want to focus more on where would we want to live because that just cuts about 30 minutes out of that question. You know,
Absolutely. But yeah, the way they hold themselves, the garb, the architecture, it all needs to be talked about in
yeah.
depth, and we will do it at some
So
point. We'll do a video on each
yeah,
of them, I'm sure.
yeah,
But that will
absolutely.
be for the future.
Next with the next question by Phoenix Exalt. That's a that's a pretty epic name. Um, what bending style would you give some non-benders based on their personalities?
It's a really interesting
Examples
one.
examples are Sokka, Cabbage Man, Warriors of Kyoshi, the Snobs and Slobs from the Great Divide, and Jet. Snobs and slobs are profoundly unworthy of being benders of any sort, so they're fine where they are, as
Well,
far
to
as
be
I'm concerned.
fair, I mean, culturally, mayhaps, but they do have some damn good fighting skills.
Two of them do, at any rate.
Well, presumably some of the
I
others have
You really want
close
to
to.
focus on them?
No, I don't. I don't. But
Okay.
let's go on Cabbage Man. So, right, I think his most got the most. No, Kyoshi Warriors. I had a good look
I
at.
thought I was really like waiting for your impassioned,
No, no, no.
answer for Cabbage Man. Like, that was a bait and switch.
Sorry, he would probably
Okay,
be one of the
so
airbenders that get given magical airbending powers spontaneously if it was in Korra for sure. But aside from that, the Kyoshi Warriors were interesting for me because
I
with the exception of firebending, I couldn't peg them initially. But I think I lean more towards Earth on their front. Dai Li style. It would lend itself well to their
I
kind
I'm
of fighting style.
completely
But
I'm completely the opposite.
but
I'm completely the opposite.
they do describe their personal martial art based very heavily or very similarly to the kind of precepts of waterbending with the push and pull and like the using of enemies' opponents' attacks against you. So there's that going for it. But in terms of the general moveset, I think earthbending would be extremely useful to them.
Yeah, I would have given them air because they have
The
fans
fangs,
which
yeah.
are ridiculous. Like boost to it. Like even Aang was like, whoa, like when he did it.
And
And
never uses
they
them again.
carry they carry swords, and when we've heard like these tales about like air swords or air blades and like how that could make like a long range sort of weapon, I would totally give them air. Like
Oh
I
well,
think they'd be
this is something I went over in
badass,
my head. I went
legendary badasses.
water, earth, and air. I considered to great amounts because they do kind of fit all of them. They're versatile combatants. But to me, I just think that the overall approach and kind of physicality of them, even when they're fighting as a unit, not just individually, I think Earth would be well suited to them. Apart from anything else, they're very much a kind of boots on the ground soldier
You know
types,
what?
which
I,
lends them
I
to that.
suspect you. I suspect you. It's just because that you love earthbending so much. You're shamelessly trying to plug it in everywhere. That's what you're
But I
doing.
love air just as much. That's my problem. So and again, you said the fans and the airblade. They'd be, but to me, they're too grounded. Immediate strike back on response, and less spin around the opponent to be air. But they have that as well. I'm not saying that they don't do that because they
Oh,
do. But it's just yeah, they could be any of the three, anything except fire. They're not aggressive enough, in my opinion, to go for fire in its
what
general
about
sense.
what about Sokka? Because that was an example they gave, so they probably want to hear the answer to that.
Soccer's another complicated one. I th- I see him very boomy, not yeah boomy as in Korra boomy esque. He could probably do a lot with that with air.
By accident.
By accident, definitely. But I think he could be like, oh god, how do I whoop, blast of air and trip over and stumble? I think that he could get along into a lot of shenanigans, pre-planned some of it even, with air. What do you think?
Mm, I feel like he would be. Um, I think he would want to study water because it's his nation and he's proud of it. Water tribe, but
Messing around in
he's
splashes and
he's
puddles.
he's completely ill-suited to it. And he doesn't move like a waterbender at all.
No.
Um, so yeah, I mean, he would need something a little bit more, maybe like some sort
Sporadic.
of yeah, some kind of sporadic staccato sort of thing. But yeah, definitely not waterbending, basically. It's like an accidental airbender, I guess, like Korra or Boomy.
Yeah.
And Jet, because that was the other example they gave. What would you give him?
Ironically,
I would,
firebending for him. He's very,
yeah,
very aggressive.
I was gonna say,
I see
I was
him
gonna say if
doing a
it's
lot of
based on his
the.
personality, if it's based on his personality, definitely firebending. But if
Mm,
it's based on his move set, I could see him being another Zahir. Like, doesn't have the airbending personality whatsoever, but I could see him turning into a Zahir combatively.
yeah, definitely. I can see that moveset wise. I think visually, I see him using firebending with like the Zuko flame whip style that we see in the cave with the crystals, where he's like lashing out. I can see a lot of kind of. He would draw on the versatility of firebending that most people don't really think to use because of all the elements, firebending is definitely the least versatile. Still very versatile, but the least. So, I mean, I think he would make extreme use of what he could with it. And again, the
Yeah,
aggression, the offense over most all other approaches, I think it would fit him well. I
yeah.
can
I mean,
definitely see
again, and
him jetting
if it,
along on the fire-bending flames as well,
oh my God,
without using the pun.
that's
Without
the
using the
only
pun.
that's the only. I was gonna say that's the real reason you said that, isn't it? Like
No,
you just wanted
no,
an excuse to say
I,
that.
I didn't say isolated earlier like you did before with the water
That was
tribe.
by accident. That was literally by. No, I was called out for that, and I didn't realize I said that.
But yeah, the not just because of the pun. I can definitely see him just ozieing towards an opponent. I mean, he practically does without the firebending. In his fight with
Yeah,
Aang and the
that's true.
Tears.
I was gonna say if it's a question of which suits his personality most, it's no question. But yeah, so that's that. Are there any others that you wanted to address, like
Can
that
you
aren't
think
listed
of
here?
what? Can you think of any? I
I
would say
mean,
Suki, but she's a Kyoshi warrior, so
we could literally do this for. I mean, Antoine kind of already does this for random characters. Like, which element would you give them? So, I
mm,
mean, we could do this for if hey, if there's if there's characters, guys, that you want us to address this for, we could do that. Like, in videos of their own. So, if you want us to pick bending styles for non-benders, let us know, and we'll do more of this in the future.
absolutely. But we have a comment
Um,
to return to, I believe.
we have a few more though before we do
Oh, have we
that.
not
There's
reached
a
the end
couple.
yet? My mistakes.
Yeah, we're almost there. We're almost to the end. Tanner Lowry. Who are your guys' favorite, least favorite characters? We already did that one. Number two, what's your favorite joke in the series? For me, the Ember Island Players is just one big joke, and it's masterful. So I would pick that one, I suppose, if you really held a gun to my head. But there's lots of great little moments. But I would have to pick that one because it's a whole episode.
I I love that episode, but I don't love it for the humor. It's
Oh,
great humor.
you're
Don't get me
crazy.
wrong.
What
No,
else
no, no,
is
no, no,
there?
no. It's great. Don't get me wrong. But that's like lesser down on for some other examples of humor that I can think of off the top of my head. So I couldn't say that one as my top. But
No,
from
I'm not telling you that it needs to be your top. I'm crazy. I'm saying you're crazy if you like it, but not for the humor,
Oh
because
no,
it
no,
is
no!
all
But I
humor.
mean, oh hang on, I've got way out of focus. I mean, the reasons I love it aren't for the humor, so I wouldn't. You know, it's great, and I definitely acknowledge it as one of the best for that. But
I'm still questioning it, even
it,
with your
I don't know.
explanation.
I like the character interactions in
Because
the
which are
stands.
humorous.
Well,
Like,
yeah,
what are
of
you
course,
talking
but
about?
I don't know. I just don't like. I don't like them because that's funny. I like them because of the kind of breath it gives for the break. Anyway, that's a whole other discussion. We'll get that when we get to the episode. But I can't think of like a specific example of one that stands out to me though, because there are so many on so different types. Anything Toph and Iroh say, I mean, just cracks me up. But and then you got the one-liners from Zuko that come out every now and then, just as good. I don't know. There are
The
too many
cough,
one-liners in this
the
show.
the, the, the cough during moments where thing was supposed to be funny and it wasn't. A
Yep.
good timing with the cough, you know. Um,
Oh
and
yeah,
then
true.
we talked about this before, like in one of our chats. The Iroh throwing the tea over the shoulder.
That actually
Um,
right. That episode, which is by the way is one of my favorite in the series, especially the one before it. The chase is an all-time favorite of mine. But
that's not the chase, by
no,
the
I know
way. That's
that's the one
oh,
afterwards.
okay.
But
Oh, okay.
those
Okay.
two that area is one of my favorite parts of the entire show. But that scene itself definitely stands out as like one of my favorite comedic moments because it's just non-stop. Every part of it, you know, the tea throwing, oh yeah, the well of chi, ocean of a vast ocean, you know, and then the Azula comment, no, she needs to go down.
Yeah.
That all of it is hilarious, but also so poignant in for the character development and what is about to. It's kind of the springboard for the story of the episode. So I love it to bits. But that probably would be up there. That specific scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, and the next episode that we review properly is going to be the fortune teller. So there's some comedy in that as well that
Yeah,
I find because it's mainly Sokka dealing with nonsense, which is always funny.
yeah. The cynical side comes
Um,
out there for sure.
the third question from Tanner Lowry: have you guys ever thought of possible versus scenarios for Avatar and Korra? Well, Antoine clearly has.
Yeah, he's done a
Uh,
number of them. Particularly Aang
I
versus
mean,
Korra.
I've always drawn parallels between fights in Avatar, with my Star Wars versus series, but I don't. It's not that I don't see the appeal of doing these. I just don't have any active plans to do any currently, except for a collab that I'm supposed to be working on with Antoine sort of soon. But I'm not sure I'm supposed to say what it is, guys. So yeah. Did you have an answer to that, Callum?
No plans to do anything. No particular interest in making versus videos at all at the moment. I'm involved in some collabs that will be coming out at some point in the reasonably near future. But again, same as you, I think, oh, how would this person fight that person, all that jazz. But I
Mhm.
never really planned to do a full on analysis of it, at least not at this stage.
And
Watch this
last
space.
question from right. Last question from Tanner. How long into the episode did it take you to find out who the Blue Spirit was? The first time I watched it until the mask came off.
For you, for sure, the entire way.
Yeah, yeah. That
I guess for
what?
final confirmation, yeah, it would be the same for me. But to
Yeah, I
me,
mean, didn't we talk about
yeah, no,
this during
as I
our
said in the
review?
show, I immediately suspected, but the red herring, oh, can't be, he'd be teleporting thing, threw me off and basically went, okay, maybe it's not. But throughout the entire episode, I was like, is it? Because it feels like it is, like it's supposed to be, and all that. I just didn't know for certain, and it wasn't one of those, oh, of course it is, moments because of the red herrings that we spoke about.
I felt
Did you not have
I
any
didn't know
suspicions
who
at
the
all?
character. No, I mean I mean I feel really attacked right now. Like, are you like? No, I'm just kidding.
I know.
Um, no, it Zuko was in the episode, but there was, like I said, it was well set up. Like I said in the podcast, rather, it was well set up in that he hadn't been established as somebody who had skill with swords. He was very actively going out of his way not to firebend, and the person's motives were hidden very well to the point where you didn't know why they wanted Aang because they come across as an ally at first, and then for strategic reasons they immediately threaten Aang's life. so that they can make an escape. So the mystery was well presented in that it wasn't like I was saying this cannot be Zuko, but I wasn't certain in my life that this is Zuko. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I didn't know who it was.
definitely wasn't certain, but I
Um,
was leaning towards that. As like, well, I would be making this guy Zuko. I was not. I was not expecting it because, like I said, the red herrings have thrown me off. But if the red herrings hadn't been there, I would have been like, oh, it's Zuko the entire time. It was
mhm.
that was just scratching me on that one. But maybe I was just
Mhm.
drawing my random blanks and it happened to be accurate. I don't know. I definitely agree with
Right.
all of your points though. They did very well to make sure they hadn't brought up his skill with weapons and that they hadn't placed him in this particular point ahead of time and all that jazz. So yeah,
It
you're right.
was a well presented mystery that
Mm,
didn't cheat. You
yeah.
know. And then our last question. Oh no, our second to last because we have the one to jump back to.
Mm.
Before we open it up to Q&A in the chat. Informal geek. I said it that way because of the way they spelled it. If you guys could create, okay, okay, an hour and a half Avatar, an hour and a half out, what? Yeah, an hour and a half long Avatar special. When would you set it? Like, okay, so basically like an animated Avatar movie. Like, they're asking, like, would you tie it into the original series or Korra or make an entirely original storyline similar to the first Avatar, flashbacks in Legend of Korra? Oh, okay. Whatever the answer is, thanks for the content. Keep it up. Um, I see an appeal to doing all of those actually.
I have two
Um,
main answers for this one. Using some of them
Go
from
ahead.
that. Um,
Go ahead and do yours first.
I'd either want a completely unrelated to any of the characters we've seen before, kind of boots on the ground, average Joe, person in the world or persons in the world, story. So maybe during the opening of the 100 Year War, just people's reaction to that. A story between some new characters in that situation. That would be very interesting. Maybe even have some airbenders attached to it. What happened to them and how they were chased down in the end. But more interesting to me would be a well done, because most likely this wouldn't be the case if we got one, which is why I'm not so sad that we didn't. But if it was guaranteed to be amazing, I would want a story bridging the gap between Aang and Korra, not plot wise, but for the characters involved. I want to see the gang in their prime, effectively, in a good
Yeah.
story. And we spoke about
I
the Red Lotus situation, didn't we?
yeah. Well, I was going to bring that up. That was a conversation we just had as friends. That wasn't for the chat, so they don't know what we're talking about. But I agree. I would probably see that for me, my mindset when it comes to making alterations to things like a sort of, to quote the title, fanfics, which is another feature on this channel. Um, when I do that, when I rewrite a story in my head, I try to keep it grounded in what we've already seen before. I try to change as little as I can, um, for the sake of like just one. I don't think I'm very good at just creating new ideas on my own. I tend to work better with a framework that already exists. And number two, to preserve the original vision, I try to work within that. And for me, Callan and I, guys who are watching, just so you know, because you wouldn't know, you would have no way of knowing. Callan and I recently had a talk about um, the fact that we thought we were going to get basically a flashback of the gang's final adventures, and how they attempted to protect Korra, who, unbeknownst to her, when she was a child, the Red Lotus, who were the primary villains of season 3 of Korra, they tried to kidnap her. And so we thought we were going to get that, like a showdown between what remained of the gang and the Red Lotus, and possibly an answer as to how Sokka died, because that answer was never given in the show. So I would probably do something like that. I would really like an hour and a half long special that began by showing sort of like the gang, like with Aang being involved because he would have to still be alive, and showing just what their lives had become, how they knew each other, and all that kind of stuff. What their lives consisted of, maybe some of their other adventures, but you can't go too deep with that time frame. But I would conclude it with just like as a proper bridge, that adventure, that showing that sort of last stand, like Sokka's last stand, or like whatever. Like which it's not even confirmed. I don't think it's confirmed that he died there, but I would have made that the point where he died, um, for a lot of reasons. But we can make a whole video on that, can't we?
Oh yeah,
Like
I
you
have a
did it.
fanfics script in mind for that one on how I would exactly, at least in terms of the framework, execute that idea. I would have it related to the koi pond in the Northern Water Tribe, um, and for the reasons that it attaches to the Red Lotus and the Avatar and Sokka, respectively. Because if nothing else, this story
Did you
would
say?
big up the Red Lotus.
Did you say correlate to the Northern Water Tribe?
Yeah, the koi pond specifically is what I was saying. The koi pond
Oh,
idea
okay. Okay.
of the Northern Water Tribe.
You,
Yeah,
you said koi pond, and I thought you said correlate. I was like,
sorry,
okay,
my
but
bad.
that's the wrong tribe.
But yeah,
Because
that
yeah,
story I think would be a really interesting one to tell, because of how it would big up the Red Lotus as a threat for the story, how it ties to their ethos and their ideologies, and how it also links to the more personal side of
yeah,
things with the
and
gang.
and and let's not forget, like this would give us a chance to see Katara, Sokka, Toph, and Zuko, maybe even Suki, fight with the Red Lotus, who are also like extremely badass, and Tenzin would be there too. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So like, or could be anyway. But yeah, all that stuff. It would be like it would be a spectacle, and it would be you know emotionally resonant and all that
Yeah,
shit.
it's a story worth
So,
telling. It's not just a continuation for no reason. You know, there is emotion and narrative to be plumbed here. It's not just it wouldn't be a cash grab. I mean, it may be end up if they had done it that it would have been. But like I said, if we could be guaranteed that quality, I would definitely shoot for that story.
right. And now, so we have one more question to do, and then we're gonna open up to like Q&A from the chat for a little bit. So we're jumping back to Max Musterman, who asked, "What is the biggest change you would make, or would have made to the story if you had full control over this series, except for pairing Zuko with Katara?" So do you want to answer first, or
Do you have
I give
anything
mine?
particular in mind?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I'm glad that you took that off the table. I'm not generally into shipping. And but I should say, before I knew what the term shipper was, I was one. Because when I was 13, 14, however old I was when I was watching this, I was definitely what has been, termed a Zutara fan. Not that I hate what happened with what they did instead. I enjoy the product of Aang and Katara's relationship. Their children are one of my favorite parts of Korra. I do not hate Katang. I just prefer Zutara. I just wanted to say that real quick. But since that's off the table, that frees me up to pick other things to change. And I feel like saying that there's not a whole lot I would change because the show's so great. But there are two things that I'm not crazy about. And for me, and this is kind of sketchy to talk about because I don't remember the comic situation. They did eventually address Zuko's mother and the search for her. Was that what it was called? The search? I just stumbled into that.
Yes, yeah,
Okay. So there's a comic arc called The Search,
I
which
think.
um,
Pretty sure.
details, pretty sure, I'm 99% sure, which details Ursa, who's Zuko and Azula's mother, and how they reunite and stuff. I but forget ignoring that for a second. If that had never been, and the show had stopped with just the end of book 3 of Avatar, that was like a complete sort of dangling. um I don't want to call it like a dangling plot thread, but it was definitely like a door that was like left like wide open for another story that seemed that it wasn't going to come. And I'm just not sure if how I feel about that.
Yeah, because
You,
we
you
spoke
know,
about it before, didn't we? How you weren't sure whether you would actually want it in the main story, how whether or not we would make this
I don't know.
change. But it's difficult
I
to
don't know how.
call because it doesn't really have any
I don't.
relevance on what's happening in the present, in terms of resolution for the
Yeah,
characters. But at the same time, you're right; it's a story that kind of needs to be told just for its own
I
merit.
really. I know that they eventually did tell the story, but from what I remember, I don't like it.
Likewise.
And but we'll save that conversation for after I revisit the material. But yeah, I feel like the decision to not give us an answer as to even what Zuko intends to do as far as his mother is concerned by the end of the series, um, that may not have been the correct one. So I really would like that to be addressed, but I'm not sure because if that's my top one. My other issue, again, deals with the finale of the show. The Avatar Ex Machina moment. I imagine everybody knows what I'm talking about. I'm sure you do, Kellen.
Hmm. There are two, in fact.
If you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google storytelling and really think about what happened between Aang and Ozai and whether or not Aang really earned that. That could have been. I have ideas for how that could have been handled better without changing very little, in fact. Um, but yeah, just the fact that he is injured to the point that he can suddenly use the Avatar state again, to me, is the weakest part of the finale in general.
That and the Dragon Turtle, two layers of Deus Ex Machina, which weren't, breaking the what happened. It wasn't like, oh my god, they've ruined the ending, but it was definitely a standout weak moment, or weak moments for
It's
the
a
finale.
Just before we're crucified, it's a lion turtle, not a dragon
Oh my
turtle. I
god,
just
Lion
wanted
Turtle. Oh, I've been playing too much D&D. Sorry. Yeah, Lion Turtle.
to. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, for some reason, yeah, the lion turtle, he does like come like right out of nowhere, just like, hey, Avatar, I got like, I got this thing to tell you, like that'll save the day.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, like at the same time, like my fix for the Avatar state still would have included that character because like I said, I try to work with what's going on here. Um, it just a line of dialogue for him to explain like why he's here, like would help.
Mm.
Uh, Instead of, hey, I'm
Some
just
subtle
passing
setup
through.
in the background, some murals and some
Yeah,
stories about lion turtles, not dragon turtles, from earlier in the series would have been great. Just something to help build it up, because it is a weak part in so far as it was an answer to a question they'd realized. Oh crap, we've run out of time. We can't address this. As to he can't kill Ozai because it goes
well,
against the character and it goes against the nature of the cartoon. So. Um,
yes,
and I hate
right.
to use that
I
term for the story
I was
because
just gonna
cartoons
say
sound so
that.
childish for this series. But yeah, essentially that Nickelodeon ethos, they couldn't do this, so it was an answer to that problem that could have been
It,
more eloquently
yeah, and
incorporated.
I agree, and I feel like I don't want to get too deep into that because we're gonna discuss it when we
Mm,
get there, you know. So rest assured, even though we're talking about this in sort of vague ways, we will properly address that point one day.
for sure.
Hope Hopefully not in the not too distant future,
Yeah, fingers crossed. Um, excuse me, sorry. You said the two of the big ones that I was going to, but the other one that I'd mention, and it's another one that we've actually spoken about a long, long time ago, about whether or not we would want to incorporate this change, is the approach to Ozai. Because thematically speaking, having him be the overarching like evil presence that doesn't have too much of a perspective granted in the story, it
Yeah.
it heavily helps the idea of the great journey and the theme. You don't want to put the face on Sauron, for example, but at the same time, doing so, not having a more flavored, nuanced spark of motivation for the character beyond the fact that he's just I'm an evil crazy person is damaging or,
Yeah.
is noticeable compared to everyone else, specifically in the royal family. They dive into the
Thing
psyches of everyone else except Ozai.
the thing is, the thing that frustrates me about Ozai is that they put all of the we have all of the cards to like build a house, for him, like his character. They just didn't assemble them. There is enough there that you can infer this person was a fairly normal person at one point, and his own father, who's crazy, the circumstances of his life, lack of discipline, inability to call his own ambitions and jealousy, all that kind of stuff. Just maybe mental illness. Those are all broached, or at least we see the building blocks there. They're just not assembled, which is fine. Ozai doesn't need to be more than what he is. but I'd kind of like it if he were, you know. Just he could have been retooled a little bit so that he would reach that Tywin status where yes, he's a villain, but you don't think of him as purely a villain, you know. And it's something very interesting that virtually I've never met anybody who doesn't like Tywin's presence, even though you could never call him a hero, you know.
Mm. He's definitely not likable in the kind of moral sense, but he's got a charisma and a presence and um, just that, yeah, charisma and presence to him that many other characters just don't. Um,
Yeah,
and he carries
I
it
will
well.
say I will say the specific thing that I would have included for Ozai is definitely I would have had him had some kind of on camera interaction with his brother. That is something that I
Mm.
always wanted. It doesn't need to be a fight, okay? Like that's not necessarily what I'm thinking, but just some kind of argument, discussion, conversation, flashback, something to
Specifically
show
about
the
Zuko would be
differences
what I
between
want.
them.
I'd want from
Yes,
that. I want the treatment of Zuko and Iroh's, approach to Ozai on that. Why broaching the
or
topic of why are you
well,
doing this? What's wrong with you?
just
That kind of thing.
or or, or even just children, because Iroh's
Mm.
lost his. He and Ozai, even though it could be argued that he doesn't love Azula, he does at least favor her, you know. So, but I mean, there's all these different shades there. It's not necessarily all about Zuko. You can include a discussion of Luten and Azula as well in this, but Zuko, of course, is the focal point. But I agree, like just some kind of interaction between those two um, wasn't necessarily desperately needed. Clearly, the show worked beautifully without that, but to me, that would have been like icing on the cake. I would have really loved that.
Mm. It would
I
have been
can
the
just
thing that
imagine.
ties all the kind of threads
It's
together for the
always
family.
that's always a good scene when you have like these two opposing sort of kings on the chessboard of like good and evil. You know, when you think of like again anything,
Tyrion
it's
and
something like
Cersei.
yeah, a clash of not just ideologies but personalities. You know, Tyrion and Cersei. You think about like not the fight between Dumbledore and Voldemort, but their meetings when he was still Tom Riddle. Those are very interesting and engaging. That's material that I love. We could have had that with Ozai and Iroh. You know.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the more we've described it now, the more I want to do a fix it episode, and the more I want to discuss it and how I would really want that in there. But yeah, that I think is definitely the way to frame it. Have it be um, focused on the two and the ideology of the family and Iroh's perspective of how he broaches it. That would be amazing for me. I think. It's a shame we didn't get it. Um,
Yeah, but I mean, but we've cheated. You know,
yeah,
we've
we
given
have.
more than one change here.
It's very true.
um,
But yeah, I
yeah.
hope you enjoyed that. At least it was a very good question. Thank you.
Yeah. So do we want to turn this over to some kind of Q&A between the people that are actually watching us, like
Yes,
at
yeah.
least for a little bit?
Open up with questions, guys. We will address them as they come at
I'm
us.
sure that I'm sure they've been asking us
I'm sure as
questions this
well, if
entire
we look
time.
back, I made the mistake of not having the messages permanently stay on screen. Apologies for that, guys. I will fix that for next
I
time.
see. I see some people like a long time ago. I saw somebody correctly reminded us that indeed um, uh, Longfang is not the only person to kill somebody. Sokka killed Sparky Boom Man. That is true.
True. Very true. There are a lot of things that will inevitably mess up. Me specifically,
Sort of
in
inadvertently,
these
sort of in
bloodlines.
it. Like it's more like he engineered his own suicide.
Yeah,
But yeah,
we see a number
that's true.
of presumed deaths as well. People falling off ramparts, people getting drowned, people all that shit. I presume that the Avatar state at the end of in the finale of Book One did some major damage to the people on those
Oh,
ships.
look. Sorry, somebody asked a really good question, or it's a two-part question, but the second part is more interesting. Samuel Stepp asks, "Who would win in a fight, Avatar Kyoshi or Avatar Roku?" Also, what are your thoughts on the morality of Roku and Kyoshi?
Oh, so fascinating. Videos by themselves. Kyoshi is
uh,
probably my
uh,
favorite Avatar. And if anyone doesn't know, she lived to about 220. So she's also the longest lasting, presumably most impactful Avatar over long periods. Anyway. Um,
longest lived, and she had the biggest feet, and I think she was also the tallest.
yep, she was a big one, that one. But yeah, the interesting thing about the question for the morality side is because these two characters Roku was not the passive avatar. That goes to Kuruk, right?
No, no,
But
no.
he sees that his fault was his impassivity and the fact that he didn't bring the conclusion that was required that would have capped off the problem and meant that Aang didn't have to deal with the situation after him.
Yeah,
Opposing
he
that. Oh,
probably.
sorry.
I was just gonna say, like, to tack onto that, he probably felt perhaps, and not unjustly, but maybe put too much stock in the idea that the Avatar is like the balancing force, and as long as I exist, what Sozin wants cannot come to pass. Um, and he's right about that. But what he didn't consider was that once he's out of the way, Sozin can do exactly what he wanted to do in the first place. And the only reason why he spared Sozin is because they were friends. And I think he, too late, realizes I was friends with a monster, you know?
Or at least what became a monster. He was looking back on his early days. Before he turned
Oh
and didn't
yeah, like
see
Sozin
what he
wasn't
is.
always that way. We saw that. But I think like if you gave him the chance to do it over again, I think he clearly would have taken the shot
Oh
because
yeah.
it's the only, that's his personality. It's not Aang's, but that is Roku's. And it's not a wrong one. We talk about the morality, it's no worse than Mace Windu, deciding he has to execute the Chancellor, which to me, like however you want to look at it, tactically and morally, just
Pragmatically.
common sense wise, pragmatically, that's not a wrong call in my view,
You're committing this great evil, and you acknowledge that it's a horribly immoral thing to do, but it's also a necessary evil if it brings about the greatest good. And the fact that you're acknowledging it, the fact that your motive is pure, it changes the equation by itself as well. Roku would I agree would have killed him. Looking back on it as a second, if he had a second chance. And the thing I like about that is that he's the line between Aang and the previous, because the previous all give him the advice of kill him, or
Just
end
do
him.
it.
Do it. You
Yeah.
need to. You're the Avatar. Get over it. In various different ways. And he's the kind
Yeah,
of bridge
Kyoshi,
between. He's the one that
Kyoshi
would.
most especially.
Oh yeah, Kyoshi is my favorite Avatar for the actual her approach to duty and her how she kind of very much embodies what the Avatar is supposed to be. Even if the individual you don't agree with it for your personal interpretation of the character, the Avatar as a completely neutral balancing point is what Kyoshi is. Even with all mistakes that we'll get to in a second. But Roku is the kind of balancing point between the two. He's the Avatar that isn't, completely against it like Aang. Like he would have made the choice if it was some other stranger that was purely evil and he hadn't known to be good and wasn't his friend, he would take the shot. But at the same time, looking back, he sees what he did as a mistake. Aang, I don't think would do. Even taking out the bending
Well,
ability removal thing.
this is where we get into Avatar Ex Machina. Aang was given an out from the situation so that he didn't have to do that. But it's the well done thing about that, which again we'll get into all this in further detail when we discuss this episode, guys. I promise. The thing is the way that they handled it. Even though I don't really approve of the way that Aang acquired this ability, his way is the best at the time because he was given that tool where no one else had it. And what's great is it doesn't portray the past avatars as wrong. They didn't have the tool. So what they're saying that is the way that you have to go. And the thing about Ozai, the way he's portrayed throughout that entire episode is even if, like, every time he's spared, every time, when he's almost shot by lightning, every time he's spared, he gets back up and still is still Ozai.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is not somebody that you can tame. You just can't.
Even
And so
after
the
he's
only
defeated and after it's all gone, he's still raging.
yeah,
He goes into Azula mode to a
every
minor degree. Even afterwards in the comics, he's
and
still a
that's
scheming little
yes,
ass. Um,
and that's the reason. That's the reason why the past avatars are right. It's just that they didn't have the same technique that Aang had.
the same options available to them, yeah. Um, and they're all telling him to kill him for that very reason. They even in that point in the story, Aang doesn't have that option, so they're going, "You have to do this, you have to do this," and he's just desperately
Yeah.
trying to think like as we said before, it's his weakness. He's trying to find a way around the problem because he's an airbender. He's not. I mean, he's not old enough at this point. He hasn't had the time to kind of
Yeah.
learn this lesson. He's not got past the idealistic, youthful moment, which everyone needs to
Asking,
hold on to. But you have to
yeah,
apply a pragmatic lens over it. You can't just stick with pure ideology. He hasn't got to that point yet.
And that's the nice thing about Yang Chen is that Yang Chen understands where he's coming from, but she's
Mm.
still like buckling down on you have to do what you have to do. Like, like you are not just I get where you were raised. It's the same, it's my home too, but that is not what you are. You are not just an airbender. You are the avatar, and this
It's
is what you need to do.
it's such that powerful line. The monks were right to raise you this way, and reach that spiritual enlightenment. But the avatar can never do it. I love that delivery because it is the hammering in the point of you are the avatar. That is your ultimate duty. It's not just a blessing; it's
Yeah.
a curse. You have to put the world before yourself. Um, at least that's where the duty comes in. He doesn't have to. An avatar could not do that. Um,
No.
but it's an interesting question by itself. What would happen if they didn't? Because other avatars can, as we've seen, exert their influence. I mean, Aang wasn't
Yeah.
driving that fight. Aang was not fighting Ozai for most of that
No,
fight.
no, but that's the cool thing, and again we'll get into that later on. But that to me, that's why I said that Aang sort of masters his himself, like that's sort of his arc in that he for a good portion of that fight he was letting his past lives do the work, and like the actual heroism is when he steps in.
Hmm.
But again, he it's I don't want to say he's cheating, but he does have an ability that they didn't. So he has an out that they weren't afforded.
Yeah. But yeah, so
But
diving into a bit more to story Kyoshi specifically, because we've skimmed over her. The moral thing with
yeah, that's
her
true.
is the Dai Li. She created the Dai Li, and we saw how that went. The interesting thing about her story is the interaction with the king. There's a line from the king saying, "How dare you defy your king?" Because obviously she's an Earth Kingdom member. She was one of the Earth avatars, and she responds with, "How dare you defy your avatar?" She's very much the kind of I'm not dictatorial, but like authoritative. I am in this position of power. I am the one who handles this balance. You have defied the balance. I'm going to stop you.
I just I
That's
just
her mindset.
I just realized that probably every avatar has had that conversation except for members of the air nomads,
Yeah,
because like you have crazies like Unalaq and Korra. You have like every other nation has some kind of power mad fool who thinks that their um uh status as like some kind of monarch takes precedence over the avatar. So they've all had that conversation, I feel like.
airbenders
But
raised in the temples are too detached. They're too, even if they
yeah.
were enough like Zahir types where they think a certain way, they
Yeah,
wouldn't be. They wouldn't be
well,
getting
he's
involved. They'd just be applying their own
even he.
mentality.
Yeah, but even he is just an extreme anarchist. He is
Mm,
not a ruler.
definitely, yeah,
He's freedom taken to like a stupid extreme that just
yeah.
just
Stupid is the
does
word.
not work.
But yeah, that's Kyoshi. She's a
Which is not a
core.
criticism, not a
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
criticism,
yeah.
but of the way, like I like Zahir as a villain. He's one of the stronger ones. But yeah.
But yeah, so you've got
The
authoritative
next one is
Kyoshi, and then you've got passive Roku
oh, sorry,
by comparison. Sorry,
we still talking about
sorry. Yeah,
Kyoshi?
but that's fine. We'll move on from that anyway. Yeah, but great question. Great question.
Yeah, very good. I'm skimming through these because they're not
Um,
all questions. Some
there's
people are just chatting,
there's
which
one
is
mentioning
just fine.
about yeah, one very good. Thank you, JKX. How are you? Um, from Talon 134. Do you guys think the rapid technological advancements seen in Korra were a mistake? I really miss the fantasy feel the last Airbender had, but didn't dislike the more 20s vibes Korra had. For me, initially, I didn't find it to be, it wasn't a criticism of the show when I watched it, but I didn't gel 100% with the technological leaps. Most of them I was fine with, but when it got to like the mechanical diver helmet type mechs, I was like, not a big fan. But looking back after the fact, looking back on it as from a world building perspective, there is literally no other way it could have gone. The trajectory that world was on from the point of the end of the Avatar, Aang's Legend of Aang, sorry. There was no way it couldn't reach that point that fast. That was going to happen no matter what. The super laser shooting mechs from Kuvira's story, not really the same
That
thing.
might be that might be a little far, but
Yeah, I'm
in other
against that
in general,
wholeheartedly. But the
yeah, they're
book one of
they're
Korra, I completely
yeah.
buy the stage of the technology of the world. I just didn't immediately gel with it. But
Yeah,
it's all
for
right.
me, there a lot of people complained about things that to me I didn't have an issue with. But like for example, where I'm going with that, like what I want to say is there are specific things that I can understand what you have a problem with, like what you just said, the Kuvira's laser shooting mechs or whatever. But in general, the setting is one that I not only buy, I also enjoy it. I like it, and I like the differentiation between the two eras a lot. Um, it's what I think that that's actually a good thing. To
It does
sort
help
of
sell the kind of unique feel of Korra for sure.
And also of the previous one. Like, yeah, we're not trying to do the exact same thing all over again. That story is still unblemished and untouched, and if you want that world, it's still there in that story. It's we're not just telling a completely different story or the same story in that same world. They changed it, which I enjoy. Because the natural inclination for most people when they're lazy, when they continue a story, is to it's like the cursed child, Harry Potter. Like we'll find a way to like tell the same story over again, and like just with different characters or like whatever. But they just sort of hit a reset button. This was actually building the world some more. But like for example, there are things that a lot of people complain about, like the city basically being powered by lightning benders. But people didn't hate that for the fact that it was being powered in that way. They didn't like how common lightning bending had become because they liked how unique that was to just pro firebenders in the previous series, which I can understand that, but to me, it's a question of like what your priorities are, I suppose.
Mm.
When it comes to your fandom.
I can understand why people are against that more than metal benders, because metal bending was just you couldn't do it. People, it's not possible, so people weren't trying really after up to an point. So when someone had learned and was then training people, as Toph did, Toph built her legacy through that. That's easier to buy. But with lightning, they sold it from the very start as being the master level technique. The absolute best of the best can do this, and then you see it turn into a job in Korra. I don't have like a massive problem with this. That was one of the things I was actually on board with in terms of selling the
The
kind of
only
modern tech, but I can understand why people are like I
Yeah,
get
I
that
mean
it does kind of cheapen the idea of a master to an extent in that world.
the
But I get
reason
the idea that it's very specialized though, so it's not like all lightning benders are masters in Korra.
the reason I like it is because of the way that Iroh explained lightning. Um, it's not so much like, so there are some people who wanted it to be exclusive to the royal family. Like it was like a genetic thing that you could only do it if you were like apex level, firebender master. But I like the idea that bending, specifically in terms of like your bending power, is determined by your work ethic and your personality and like what you put into it, and not so much your genetics, which is my inclination with most every kind of power um, in any magic setting or magic system. But in any case, uh, the thing I liked about lightning being perhaps it shouldn't have been so common, but the thing I like about it being more common than it was is it makes me feel like Zuko promulgated like that sort of not rage driven firebending um, philosophy
Ethos,
that he
yeah.
learned. Yeah, I like the idea that he changed the world in that and just made people they were drawing their bending from something other than what they'd been brainwashed basically into using it for before.
In terms of missed opportunities, I would have probably taken lightning bending down the route of it was still extremely rare and only the best of the best, but they could do it enough where they were generating enough power to have the impact that they supposedly do in Korra. With them being extremely wealthy as a result, it would be a very high class elite job. One of the perfect examples as to why
Yeah,
benders
that's
had an
true.
advantage over
Yeah,
non-benders and helping sell the idea of inequality for that first series. I
I
think that
agree
would
with
have been
that.
a good example of how that could have been told.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, so that could have some missed opportunities they could have perhaps gone for, but it wasn't any. That wasn't one of the things that massively bugged me. To me, it was the
Yeah.
the first mechs we
See,
see, which weren't breaking anything, but they were pushing the boundaries for me. And then beyond that, the actual super mechs were like, no, this is ridiculous.
yeah, but I mean, I just wanted to jump back to that. Like, I think some people take quotes too seriously. Like, when Iroh says when he's describing lightning and he says only a select few firebenders can do this. It's not because they're, um, it's because that's how many exist. It's not like they're the only ones that possibly can ever do it. And I feel like people took it the other way. Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, but yeah, that's just addressing. I'm sorry to like um, root this conversation in that issue. Getting back to like the question in general, especially the aesthetic. I like the way that the world changed and just the look of everything quite a lot.
Architecturally,
Uh,
I'm definitely on board with that. The actual kind of feel and the shift, I completely agree, and I appreciate
people's
the
clothing though, people's
turn.
clothing
Yeah,
too. I really like people.
the thing I take issue with on that front though is that it was very much a rip from 1920s New York series. That they literally just copy pasted it and changed like minor tweaks. I appreciated the more major steps they took away from pre-existing cultures in the original series that they perhaps didn't as much or to as great an extent with Korra. But at the same time, appreciate that with the technological leaps they had, there are certain limitations born of just physics and engineering that would lead them to be more constrained to what happened in actual reality. But they're just things I take issue with on like a
Reason,
minor level.
the reason I don't mind that is because I like New York. I've been there and I enjoy it. But also, it's not as if that's all they ever did. Like they created Zaofu. Like
Oh,
there's
it's
all
very
these
true.
other
Yeah,
like
yeah,
interesting. There's all
definitely.
these other. I just wanted to get it clear that like it's not like they were lazy completely and just didn't do anything original. There was like lots of stuff that I was completely. I don't want to say fantastical, but but it is. But it was original, I should
Yeah,
say. You know what I mean?
completely agree. What they did with the Southern Water Tribe having been kind of reborn, the metal domes. So, lots of creativity went into it. It was mostly just the first series where it was constrained to Public City by itself that suffered from it the most, I think, in terms of the shift, and that kind of was what was focused people's perspective. They didn't give the rest of the series as much of a chance on that level as a result.
Oh,
Um,
somebody here. Oh, sorry. Are
no,
we ready
sorry.
to move on?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're looking for
Uh,
some more
we
questions.
got a long list of people who have killed people. Like Kyoshi killed that one dude, if I remember correctly. Says
Well, I mean, she considered the fact that she did, but it was kind of an accident.
even Aang was like, not really, not really. You didn't. But she's like, well, don't worry about it, man. I would have. Like,
Yeah,
don't get it twisted. I would have. Like, don't let there be any doubt. Somebody says, Sir Jedi Sentinel says. Sozin killed Roku, kind of. Well, yeah, it's a kind. Not, no, he didn't. Not really. He
let him
just
die.
he let
Didn't
him
help
die.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was
Katara's
cruel.
mother's killer. Yeah, Katara Blacksmith says Katara's mother's killer. Yes,
Oh,
absolutely, but not on camera though.
yeah,
Like, you know
lots
what
of
I mean?
off-screen deaths. Of course, there's a 100-year war going on, but yeah, we're talking about
Yes.
on-screen presence.
I'm
For the
sorry
most
that
part.
like this is so belated. At this point, these people made these observations an hour and a half ago, and we're
Yeah,
just getting to
sorry.
them.
Hope you're still thinking about them, guys.
Kara Karakav. I want to know more about Guru Pathik or Pathik. I'm not sure how you pronounce that.
Yeah, he was an
Where
interesting one. It's like
Yeah,
chakra,
how
chakra.
didn't I think about I didn't think about him. I was thinking about side characters who should know because the guy knew Monk Gyatso.
Yeah, I mean, he knew what his job was way ahead of time. What was like a predestiny type thing. He was
Yeah,
supposedly his role to teach him this, but
this guy, yeah,
he's a bit of a
he
weird one.
definitely should have been. I feel like he should have been like an outcast of like the White Lotus. Like he
Yeah,
was a member, but like he's not anymore. He's like the Qui-Gon of the White Lotus.
I had a similar thought for leader of the Dai Li as well. I keep forgetting his name. But yeah, I would have thought he
Long
would
Feng.
make Long Feng.
Long Feng.
He would have been a good character to be like an early excluded from the White Lotus thing. He was brought in, and then when he got a bit mental, or when he revealed that he was mental, that was when he kind of was excommunicated from the order. You could do a lot with that. You could have the Guru be attached to the Lion Turtle, have him be what introduces that element earlier on in the series, or at least partially, and then he kind of comes along. Aang, I've brought you a friend at the end of the story, kind of thing. There are different ways you could go with this, different ways you could thread it in, because he does kind of appear and then vanish,
Hmm.
without much panaz. But it was a very memorable
Yes,
character. I mean, if he had like 3 episodes that he was in, and he sticks in the mind, even if you don't immediately recall him when first looking back on the
yeah,
series.
definitely. I'm skipping through some of these, especially because these are so old. These comments, sorry guys, we really, we're not pros at the whole live streaming thing. This was half, pre,
Patching a hole.
yeah,
um,
yeah. This whole thing is completely flying by the seat of our pants, and in stand of a proper episode this week. Dark Blue says, personally, I enjoyed Bolin more than Mako. I agree. I like
I
Bolin.
completely agree. Yeah, he had more personality. He didn't really contribute as much, well, anywhere near as much as I would like as a character, but he contributed more, particularly in the later series. We don't
Yeah.
talk about season 2, but yeah,
No.
his
Well, no, I have to say he's one of the more entertaining parts of season two for me. Aside from the stupidity
well,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
subplot, um, he like I really enjoy his final fight sequence of that season. Uh, and he's lively, and
Yeah,
he's dealing with the
he was the only part of the initial romantic triangle, square, whatever, that was just
yeah,
abysmal. It was the only part that I kind of could see something in, at least a
yeah,
semblance of
yeah.
something worth watching.
And to be fair, he does eventually get a well realized romantic arc, going on, like with Opal, which like it's not like it was the
Mm.
greatest thing ever,
Yeah,
but
and it
it's
comes
it's
after
definitely
two
a,
bad ones, but yeah, it comes eventually.
comes eventually, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
What would be your guys' perfect Avatar video game by Talon134?
Perfect
I'm not
Avatar video game.
sure because bending is extremely difficult to incorporate into a game system out. RPGs, for example, tabletop RPGs, it would be amazing for. I've seen many versions. I've played versions where you can do the whole bending shtick because there's the versatility there. But when it comes to like coding a game, it would be I'll press this button to do a fireball. I'll press this button to do a fire whip. You wouldn't be able to go I want to use this fire whip as a lasso now and or lasso. What did I say, lasso? Whatever. And I want to use earthbending and make a giant hammer. There's too much. All of the things that you would want to do with the bending styles and the movements they'd be doing to execute them,
I'll just
it's too out off
I'll
the
just
wall.
wait. I'll wait for 15 years, and when they get the VR system going to the point that like that you could just do everything, then
The,
it'll be fine.
the funny
It'll be
thing about
fine.
that though is then you'd get a bunch of people completely failing at bending. It's like I'll do this,
Well,
and like a little pebble will
well,
go, or something will miss, or
they'll have to handicap it, or some kind of way, so that we don't have to be, because that would be so terrible if it was like some kind of MMO version of that where like half the people playing, or just like not even that, like 10% of the people playing actually know martial arts, like, or something. That would be ridiculous.
it'd be a great
That should
learning incentive though.
actually that should be a thing. Actually, I actually do want that to be a thing.
Yeah,
And
someday,
only I
someday
want
when
to
we have the
only I
technology,
only I want to be the one eating popcorn on the side. I don't want to play. I will watch everyone play. I'll be at the sideline, just in the middle, watching this farce.
it would be great.
What else have you got? Where did you even read that question? I don't know where you found that.
Right at the bottom of the chat, one of the more recent
Oh,
ones.
at the bottom.
Um,
Okay.
what else is there? Any more questions, guys? Keep them throwing our way because we'll add them on. Given
How
that
about
Dolphin,
we got about we'll give it 15 more minutes if people ask enough questions, and if not, we'll sign off, before that.
yeah,
But I mean, because this has gone on for what, about 2 hours?
3 hours at this point.
No, that's us. Like
Good
like
point.
with our setup.
Yeah, about I don't know some an amount of time has passed. Yeah, we'll be wrapping up soon, guys. Send in the last
Yeah,
questions if you want to get
an
anything
amount of
burning
time has
concern.
passed.
A considerable amount of time. Then I'll slightly narrow it down.
That was like
Uh,
one of the most nothing descriptions ever. Here's a question. What does it say? I hope this is a good question because I didn't screen it. Do you think the Swamp Tribe waterbenders would have an easier time learning blood bending due to them already knowing plant bending? Possibly, possibly, I suppose.
Potentially, I don't know. There's a sort of
Blood bending to me,
spiritual
it's
element to
not.
blood bending that you're kind
Yeah,
of breaching the spiritual
it's
barriers of the body. It's not just plant life kind of thing. But I don't know. That's interpretation of my own sake.
the thing about water bending to me is that it's the single most to me, and this is just my opinion, and if people want to argue it, then that's fine. It's the most, it's the element that I think has that sort of it like almost deeply ingrained moral yin and yang, that dark and light side, because you can use it to heal. You could use it in a sort of neutral sense, and like you can repair the body. You can use it for combat. You can use it um, to manipulate the water and other living material to draw it out of material, or to bloodbend. It's just this very layered, thing where like fire, you can't, you know what I mean? Like that's always
Yeah,
going
I
to
completely understand.
be.
There are good and bad for each of them, but the spectrum gradients in the spectrum are so much more versatile in waterbending. You
Yeah,
can stop someone from dying of thirst, or you can drown them. You can help
yeah.
heal them internally, or you can rip their internal organs apart from the inside. You can
It has because we're composed of water in a way that, I mean, yes, there's minerals in us, right? But I mean, in a quantity that you can actually manipulate. Like, I mean, you can go really dark with water really quickly. And Hama showed us that if the show basically wasn't rated G or PG, um, it's like an insta kill, ability, like without any other elements being needed. You don't need to like pull metal or earth from some other source. You don't need to even generate fire. or to pull the air from the lungs. Like I could just crystallize the water in your eyeballs, you know, um, if you really want to go that dark and crazy with it. And the thing about bloodbending, the way it's presented is you don't get the speech that Iroh gave, where it's only a select few firebenders know how to separate the positive and negative energies, and you know, and can strike with just neutrality basically, which is interesting. That says a lot about Azula and Ozai in that in the moments when they're using it, they're feeling nothing supposedly,
It's
which
cold-bloodedness,
is
not rage.
yes, yes, and it's called the cold-blooded fire, I think he says,
Mm.
but bloodbending is different in that it's not Katara never once practiced using it before she used it. She just
Did it?
let down that mental barrier, which she didn't like, but she had to do it in the moment. So it's something that to me, as long as the full moon's out, and because you need the full moon, unless you're Amon or his father or his brother, which we'll explain that or we'll address that issue one day, um, and whether or not we think it's correct storytelling. In other words, as long as the full moon's out and you're willing to go far enough, any sufficiently practiced and skilled waterbender should be able to do it. And that's kind of what I like about it is that it's sort of like a moral high road that you don't take if you're a civilized person. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah. It's an open gate that fortunately few people even realize exists or let alone take. But
Yeah.
unlike the other disciplines, the extreme horrors you can do with the others require a much higher skill entry. The skill floor is
Yeah.
much higher than the rest of it for waterbender. It is slightly terrifying. Um,
Yeah, and so that's the reason why, like, to answer the question specifically, like, I don't really feel like any waterbending discipline, like, really better preps you for that. It's because it's more of it's not so much mastering the technique as it is mastering yourself or losing mastery of yourself, like allowing like your inner demons to control you, like in a very scary way.
Apart from anything else as well, there's almost no way of defending against it. If someone starts bloodbending you, that's
Yeah.
your ability to bend gone because you can't move.
Unless you're a powerful enough waterbender, because that's all Katara
Yes,
did.
yeah, yeah.
Her will just had to be stronger than Hama's with regard to the water in her own body. So a powerful enough waterbender should always be able to be immune to it.
Mm.
Which
Or
is
some
interesting.
psychic types being able to use their abilities without
Not
having the
a
movements as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, and not immune to it, but have a defense against it. Which is interesting that Katara's not in that courtroom. Like when we see Yakone use it for the first time, the only person able to resist is Aang, and that's only with the help of the Avatar state, which makes sense for
Mm.
him because he's not mastered water to the point that Katara has. Even I imagine in his prime wouldn't have.
Yeah, definitely. It it's one of those kind of moments in the story where it's very clear why she's not there because that question would be raised of why is she not doing anything about it.
Mhm.
Which is unfortunate because obviously we would like to see her have way more of a presence in the story than she does. But at the same time, that is obviously the reason she wasn't there. So it makes sense on that front.
We want to move on to another question.
Yes, yeah. Is there one that we
Do you
can
have one?
see?
I see one.
Go for it. Go for
It
it.
says, if Azula never went crazy, would that have changed the outcome of anything? I'm imagining they're talking about the fight. Like, would she have been on form?
Probably. I'm of the
Think,
opinion that
I
Zuko
think,
is that there's a lot more parity between the two than people that particularly
I agree.
expect. I
That's
think
and
Zuko's I think Zuko's interpretation is that he's again coming down to not being confident enough.
yeah,
He
he's what you just said though. Like 10 years ago, not that long ago, maybe like 7 years ago, whenever the show was wrapping up, that would have been blasphemy.
hmm
I guess it is like 10 years ago. Like
Yeah, at this
the
point, yeah.
Sozen Comet is 2008, I think. Um, yeah, like the Azula fandom would have ripped out like our throats for saying that. But I do think that the two of them by the end of the show are basically on the same level. She might still be more technically proficient, and she does have lightning, which he never displayed mastery over. Even in his later years, we don't know if that changed. I like to think it did, but we're never shown that. But the thing is, had she not been crazy, I don't think she would have been baited into a fight in the first place. But and even if she had been, because she wouldn't have banished everybody in the Fire Nation capital. um, but even if she had been, even if she found herself in a position where she has to fight and she's still on form, The thing is, Zuko probably would have said, Katara, back me up, and then it's to me same outcome
Mm.
because Katara had her at the end of book two. Let's not forget.
Oh yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed that fact actually. People underestimate Katara all the time, and I always point examples like that. I was like, don't underestimate Katara when she's got a pool of water next to her to draw from, at least. Yeah, no, you're right. I don't think it would change ultimately. It would just change the circumstances. Because they're apart from anything else, firebending between masters of maybe not equal but at least near equal skill. It's the discipline that's most easily compatible. You know, firebenders on firebenders. Two near masters are going to have an easier time defending at least against one another's powers than any of the other disciplines, with the exception of perhaps air, depending on the person involved. You know, if
Yeah,
we're
it become a lot of it is an endurance run.
yeah, the endurance run, the actual effects of the abilities being thrown. You know, if a giant boulder is thrown at you, yeah, you may be able to block it, but the impact of it exploding, the force of it heading back towards you, the strength it takes, and the time it takes to throw something up. You know, the it's different from being able to just move your hand and just cast aside a fireball. You can't just move your hand and cast aside a giant rock, at least not unless you're pulling off a particularly like masterful skill, Toph style. You know, she'd probably just split it and triangly blast it backwards or something. But the different options that are available to you in just mitigating the initial effects are more open with firebending. So there's all that argument going with it as well. But yeah, ultimately it wouldn't change much at all.
I just saw somebody who hasn't been here very long. He said, "You guys are still going. That's awesome. I thought I missed it. We'll be posting the whole live stream after it's done." Yes, yes, we
Yes,
will.
yes, it'll be
So
on
yeah,
for you to catch up on,
yeah,
no problem, as soon as this is wrapped up.
yeah. I mean, this video is going to be probably a little over 2 hours long, I would imagine.
Yeah,
We're going to
more
be
than that.
wrapping up
Yeah,
soon. But even though you missed most of the video, it's all going to be available for your consumption after the fact.
yeah, very shortly. Glad you could make it though for the tail end. Any questions you want to throw our way? Please do.
Yeah, we
Um,
got about five more minutes, guys, and then we're gonna hang up the phone here.
can you guys name what martial art each element were made after? Yes, Northern Shaolin for fire, Hungar for earth, Bagua Zhang for air, and Tai Chi for water.
I do want to point out, like, you said that in a different order, so I know that you pulled that out of your head, but there was a cheat sheet there. Somebody already answered that question in the chat,
Have
so
they?
that's impressive that you know. Yeah.
Okay, my bad.
No, it's
No,
okay.
to be
Like,
fair, I
no,
did
no,
say
no.
Bagua
I
Zhang
was,
and Northern and I didn't say Shaolin actually, but yeah, Bagua Zhang. I said so.
oh yeah,
I
that's
do
true.
know it because
Like,
I am that sad.
yeah, I was just saying, like somebody, like that was there.
But yeah, so yeah, that's. I really love the fact that they incorporated the martial arts as well. We spoke about it in one of the earlier episodes in the series, but they took the time to not just mirror, but draw from, and then kind of logically feed it into the way that the bending was, affecting the elements around them. It was so good, and beautifully paired with the animation as well. Uh,
Um, what does this say? Somebody, this might be a question for you. Given that Dave Filoni worked on Atla, do you guys think that the portrayal of the air nomads may have leaked into his portrayal of the Jedi?
um, to an extent, that there's a lot of similarities between the two. The main difference is that the Jedi aren't detached in the same way that Airbenders are. Airbenders, you get the impression that they wouldn't get involved with worldly affairs unless absolutely necessary, as is the case with speed training the Avatar, because they need to get the Avatar into the field at the start of the 100-Year War or just before it. But with the Jedi, they're always involved. That yes, on the emotional side, they're seeking the enlightenment, they're seeking the emotional control and the ability to kind of separate themselves from the concerns of the self, but they're very much putting themselves forwards on the front line of every single crisis that they can, and trying to do the best they can to kind of protect the society in the galaxy and the morality they perceive as being worth defending. Airbenders, I mean, it says something that the most powerful airbenders that ever existed are the ones that gave up on any earthly ties. At all. Like, I don't care about anything besides the freedom that I now possess in the enlightenment that I have achieved, giving you the ability to kind of defy gravity full stop. That says something about the way the creators were kind of trying to aim them as a people, and as well as the focus of Yang Shen on Aang, stepping away from the teachings and focusing on the worldly concern because he is the Avatar. She
Yeah.
wouldn't have been that driven and pointing that out if it wasn't a huger gap
See,
in
I
psychology.
that that's sort of like a classic idea, I suppose, is the idea that it's sort of like I hate to sound cheesy or ham-fisted, but like, it's sort of like a dark side of enlightenment.
Mm.
You know, like
No, it very much is. I agree.
if you focus just on the pursuit of knowledge and self-betterment and just isolate yourself and focus just on yourself, even an average Jedi, if they did that, would be much more capable and powerful than they were, but it's at the expense of the effect they can impact, the good impact they can have on the world around them if they don't do that. That airbender that Zahir quoted, whose name I can't recall, that does not sound like a good person. Even though he's not necessarily a bad one, okay, but he's not a good one. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
he could. It's not what he's doing to affect the world negatively. It's what he's not doing to affect it positively. It's that
Right, and it's
detachment, and that's not my concern. I'm over here. If you want to read spiritual enlightenment, come join me. But I'm not, going down to your base level and
and that's
interacting with you.
and for me, no matter what mythos we're talking about, whether it's Star Wars, Avatar, whatever, if there's like I mean, this is just a philosophical question about power in general, but specifically, when it comes to like magic systems, there's often a cost that you pay to obtain a kind of power, and cutting oneself off emotionally and spiritually, or well, emotionally anyway, in this case, um, to obtain the power of flight, it's like, well, what are you doing with it? I mean,
Mm.
what's the purpose of your power exactly? And to me, like as a person, I just can't relate to a mind like that.
It's the big
But
dividing
somebody
line
like
between
Zahir,
Sith and Jedi, isn't it? Yes,
yes,
yeah,
yes,
yeah. It's where is my flower? It's that question.
yeah.
It's like,
But
well, don't
even
be
and even
ridiculous. No, I'm serious. Make me a flower.
when it's done well, even the villain or antagonist has trouble with it because Zahir
Mm.
wasn't. He didn't immediately have that power. It was only after the thing he loved most in the world was taken from him that he was able to achieve that state, which kind of says a lot about it. That you have to be in like a fragmented, like you have to be a little off your rocker to be able to do this, which is why
So
Tenzin can't.
devoid of caring and anything that
Yeah,
really matters in a life. What's
there's a
like you
there's a
said, what's the
point.
point in flying if you don't care
Yeah,
about anything?
yeah, there's a point where in the episode where like Tenzin is watching him going, "Oh, he's unlocked powers of airbending that haven't existed." And I feel like if Aang was there, he'd be like, "You know what? I'm proud that you can't do that." Like because like that would mean that that you're gone.
Mm. I mean, it says something that the fact that even if you started to enjoy and appreciate the power you have, you would then immediately lose it. That it says something about the
Uh,
void you have to
uh,
fill within yourself to actually achieve this
Gu-
power.
Guru Lahima, somebody was kind enough to Nathaniel Caldwell was kind enough to remind us his name, that
Thank you.
ancient one. Yeah. Um, People are coming in with questions now that we're getting ready to wrap up. But thoughts on Sokka and Suki? Just real quick, I think because we don't have much time, Callan, feel free to weigh in, but let's just not spend too much time on
Of
this.
course, yeah.
I will say that, in my opinion, it's the most well done romance between people in the original series for sure.
Completely agree. I very much enjoy it. I wish we had more on it. Not to the extent where it distracts from the main story, but I wish we had more Suki because she's one of my favorite characters in the show, and it's absolutely without question the best romance portrayed. Not that it focuses on it or anything, but the natural uh, existence and delivery of it is way ahead of anything in either series, as far as I'm
It,
concerned.
yeah, I was gonna say like for Korra, the romance in Korra is something that's very often um, criticized, and in some cases rightly so. But in my opinion, romance isn't something that the original Avatar series dealt with very well, or especially well in any case. So to me, it doesn't really stand out. But the area where they got it the most right, really to the point where there's nothing wrong with it, is what I'm saying is Sokka and Suki.
Mm.
That's the best one that they had, and it's not one of the standouts of the show in my mind, but I can understand why it would be to some people, and it's certainly well done. I don't have any problems with it.
Completely agree on all points. You don't go to
Um,
Avatar for romance.
no, no. Sokka versus Zuko in a sword fight. There's actually a joke comic about this. Um, where if you haven't seen it, I'll just say Zuko wins the war of swords, but Sokka wins the war of words.
Which
But
fits
you
the
can check that
characters, I
out.
think,
Yes,
in
yes.
that particular situation.
Um, but it
Um,
is played mostly for laughs, just so you guys know. It's not especially serious, but it does establish the probably obvious that Zuko is technically much more proficient than Sokka is at that point. At that point, anyway.
Definitely,
Who
yeah.
knows what he became?
Nathaniel
Um,
Caldwell has specifically asked me why my symbol is on its side. Initially
oh,
thought it was a mistake, but the swirl is still correctly. Good spot. The reason for that is twofold. One, I'm a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to visual aesthetic, and I'm sorry, but that Earth symbol from the top going down looks ridiculous. If you just stick it up the right orientation, with it being the narrower side at the top, hanging down and protruding from the frame, it looks really awkward. Don't like it. But after I put some thought into, why would I be doing this besides this, and is it a good thing in another way? My personal enjoyment of earthbending and my personal approach to it, would I ever be one, that would be wonderful, is completely sideways and separate from the average earthbender. Matt has commented before that earthbending is his least favourite of the bending types because of the way it's visually
oh yeah,
presented.
yeah.
But every way
It's
I would
true.
earthbend is completely separate from that. I'm much more of a mix between
Suyin.
Toph, Su Yin in her prime mixed with Toph at a very old age. That would be how I would earthbend, which is very much
My
sideways
favorite.
from the average person.
When we're talking about the aesthetics of bending, earth bending to me just it's not my thing, but Suyin makes it look good. And Toph is cheating because Toph can snap her fingers and change the world. So I mean, like that you can't expect to bend like Toph if you would drop yourself into the world. That's cheating. But
Mm.
Suyin, if you put in enough work, you can grow into a Suyin, and she's badass. Not that Lin isn't. I want to. Lin is she's up there, but Suyin, she looks like an airbender doing the work of an earthbender, and it's a beautiful thing.
Which is how I would earthbend. I would earthbend like an airbender, basically, given the
Which
choice.
and that's a thing. That's like personality wise, you to me are an airbender. Which is why the earthbending thing is weird. But because Suyin exists, I can see you. I like what you're saying has precedent
Hmm.
to me.
And ironically, I would take all of the acrobatics out. I'm a much more grounded combatant,
Yeah,
so
and
that would be the
someone
side that would make sense
someone
there.
did someone did ask us in the original why did we choose our logos or yeah we skipped that question for the stream like back in our the ones that were submitted on Wednesday.
Apologies.
It says yeah Dage or Dag. It's the only question we skipped by accident. I just realized. I'm not sure how to say that. Dage or Dag asks, for what reasons did you choose the elements that you identify with?
We'll probably do full videos on the more in-depth explanations for these. But for me, I'm very 50-50 complete split between air and earth. I Combatively, I dislike the acrobatics in airbending. The last thing I would want to be doing in a fight is spinning around upside down in midair. Perspective wise, I like to keep focused concentration. But philosophically, I'm very much, as Matt said, I think leaning towards air and personality. Everything about them is my style except for the detachment from the worldly concerns. That's the exact opposite of me, and that's where my stubborn core roots come from, and that's why I would lean to more towards earth just as much. But yeah, it's 50-50 split between one day I'd prefer to be an airbender, one day I'd prefer to be an earth, but my main dominant focus, the one I stick to most of the time, is earthbending like an airbender.
Yeah. I've just always I like the idea of the. I feel like I kind of got into this a little bit earlier when I mentioned that to me water had the most. It was the element with a distinct light and dark side, whereas the others don't have one, in my opinion, or in my view. And I enjoy that dichotomy so much because I think that you can apply it to anybody's psychology, like where they align like within that spectrum. Setting aside that point, the way that they animate the water in especially in season 3 of Avatar and onward into Korra is amazing. It just looks mesmerizing, and I would like to be able to manipulate water in all its various forms, steam, ice, liquid, whatever. Just visually, I think it's cool, and I love the versatility of water, especially because you can use it for healing, which like that's just straight up Jedi. Like to me, that's like a Jedi power that I would definitely want. And that again, that push and pull, that element of change and all that. Again, just it's interesting to me in a psychological sense, especially because like your weaknesses can be your strengths. Your the same ability that gives you the ability to do so much good and create so much light if you choose to, can also lead you down a very dark road like Hama. And it's also the element that got an episode dedicated to all those different sort of applications in the form of the Puppet Master, which is the episode that cemented my opinion that if I had to, if I got to choose an element, water would be mine. So that's my long-winded answer to that question.
Your reasoning is much more tied in like the as with waterbending in general to the blend of like the physical and the philosophical. For me, it's more I separate the two and love them for different reasons. You know, the philosophical mindset being the where I would use the abilities, and the actual applications and the styles themselves focused on how that would manifest. You know, we spoke before how you aren't a big fan of the caster types. You know, move hand, something happens. You like the kind of
Well, I
dynamic
like
motion
it. No,
attached.
I
Oh,
like it.
preference wise, I mean.
I prefer it when it's when you can see the movement of the characters reflected in the element as opposed to them just doing something and causing spectacle.
Yeah, and I prefer like the Toph minimalist moment, you know, where she kind of just shifts her shoulder and moves aside with the
Yeah.
boulder and takes a step and moves like with the mud beneath her feet. You know, that's my kind of shtick. I like the simple minimalism, um, but at the same time, you then like Unalaq's fighting style, which is pure Dooku minimalist efficiency, and I don't like that visually. So there's so many
Yeah,
different
I
parallels.
love that. Yeah, I love Unalaq's like the minimalist, sort of, and especially because and Unalaq. But I want to say I just said I love Unalaq. I hate Unalaq as a character, but like his bending style, like I envy that. That's amazing. I think that it's uh admirable and something I would strive to be capable of if I was a waterbender. Especially the way they animate his footwork is amazing.
It's very cool. Just not personally my style of preference. That's all. But it's interesting how they kind of the philosophies overlap and
But see, I
play
like
to
that.
different
I
parts.
like that. I like those ones that use finesse, like Suyin, Azula, Unalaq. That's something I really enjoy.
And I like more of the casters. You know, Katara, Toph. Thinking of a core example.
OP, I
Well, no,
know.
no, not just OP, but the simple low level examples of it. You know,
No, I'm kidding.
just Toph kind of doing the whole one arm movement on one arm wave, and the rock just moves with it.
Yeah,
It's like the
I'm
most I
kidding.
like going to the
And
dynamic.
in fairness to Katara, she is not the most OP waterbender. That would be Amon. So, I'm not criticizing Katara.
One of my favorite Katara
But
moments is
yeah,
the octopus movement as well. That's very cool. But yeah, someone
I
asked the
agree.
question
Yeah,
of
well, but that's again, that's an example of something I like because you can see the
mm,
element reflecting her emotions. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
it's like a blend of the two. She's
Um,
not quite replicating the entire thing, but it's like the merge where she's doing a little bit of motion that then does so much more that you can see is cerebrally focused. That's my favorite.
yeah. Did you
Cerebrally.
have another question you're about to say before I said that?
Someone asked, are firebenders supposed to be the Japanese? And the answer is yes. They're drawn heavily from Japanese culture
Yeah,
in aesthetic.
culturally, even historically,
Yeah, the imperialist
when it comes
agenda.
to, but also just the sort of the success they're enjoying in terms of modern warfare. Like or
Technologically,
the
yeah.
most. Yeah, I mean, I mean, if you think about the way that the Japanese sort of steamrolled over the nearest competition due to technological innovation, whereas we had more traditionalist opposition, against them. That's kind of the Fire Nation in a nutshell,
Mm.
right there.
And all of the nations have their influences. Inuit for the water tribes.
Or
Pardon me. China for the Earth Kingdom. Heavily drawn, particularly Ba Sing Se style kind of architecture and clothing designs. And Buddhist monk temple kind of designs for the air temples as well. But the thing I like about Legend of Aang, Last Airbender for those in the US and pretty much anywhere outside of the UK, I like that the cultures and the styles were shifted like one step away. Like you didn't just look at it and go, "Oh, that's Japan. Oh, that's China." It was, "Oh, that's
right,
China." It's they
it's one of my
actually,
favorite things.
yeah,
Uh, I
they
love that
draw
it's
heavily, but
I,
it's a step away from what is actually
yeah.
real life.
Because especially like if for nothing else, people get offended,
Mm.
when like their culture isn't properly when it's appropriated. That's like a new thing, or when it's not appropriately realized, or whatever. Which is what it's not your world. It's a different world that's influenced by your history and your customs and all that, but it is essentially an alien world,
And
which gives them all the freedom in the world to do what they want to do with it, all
absolutely,
the
and
power in the world.
absolutely, and the direct references they do pull, and the influences that are so the more obvious ones, they treat I think respectfully,
Hmm.
quite well. I never felt like
Yeah,
oh that's a
and
bit like ugh, in
and
this episode in this series that I can think of off the top
they
of my head.
make it. particularly like with like the Fire Nation, it's easy to see them as like the villains because they are. But they're not the only people that are bad in the show. It's not like everybody else is an idyllic, utopia. There are villains in every culture. But also the Fire Nation is very importantly is not purely bad. It's just being led by a monarch with absolute power who is distinctly bad, of course. And they're not demonized like for like that sort of their cultural differences. Like that's not what makes them bad. It's just the people at the helm
Yeah, the
that
people
need to go.
applying the culture. I mean, dictatorships, by and large, throughout history, have often been the greatest forms of leadership. The problem lies in the ones that aren't good and the transition between the different, eras. You have to. Democracy is often worse. It's just better in the long
Yeah,
term. Short term, it can be
yeah.
better. So there's
Um,
and
I,
it gets that across in the series. I think you're just
I
seeing the
know
other question as well, from
we're just
WJB61274123.
yeah. I was laughing at that. I was like, is this going to be our last question? But
The
would you guys
boulder.
consider would you guys say, "Oh, I forgot that should have been like one of the best jokes, The Rock and the like the boulder's The Rock." But anyway, like, would you guys say Haru and the boulder are master level benders?
Answer
I
no.
don't
Maybe in the future,
I
not at the moment.
I don't know about Haru, but I um I
The
guess maybe not the boulder. No, maybe not.
the
I was thinking the guy that actually ran the ring. Um, he did go down to Toph, but so does everybody. Um, but he was actually pretty good. Like he was actually pretty badass. He put up a good
mm,
fight, and Toph won through her toughness, not so much because the guy sucked. You know.
yeah, no, they have power and they have potential, but I don't think they've, with the exception of that ringmaster, mayhaps. The
The boulder, I think, is on the cusp.
Yeah,
At least
he's got the from the power. He's just not got any of the the finesse and the execution that was required to reach that kind of mastery.
philosophically, yeah, philosophically, he's not master level at all. But I mean, technically speaking, he's definitely better than most earthbenders that we see. I would imagine better than most people you would find like in the street or even in the higher echelons of like the military. You really need somebody with either overwhelming power or fine control, like a member of the Dai Li. I would expect an average member of the Dai Li to be better than him, for
Mm,
example.
definitely, yeah.
Um, but that doesn't. They're pretty elite, so that's not really that much of a criticism. But he's close to mastery.
There are different kinds of power as well. You could be able to pick up a much larger amount of earth than someone else. The raw energy that you're putting into it might be better. But if you can do that, and then the other person just knocks you over with a single like pebble move, or just makes you do the splits with a bit of mudslide, that what good is it? It's execution versus actual power level.
Um, Warlord David asks an important question. How do no one outside of Bossing say know what it is really like?
The
World
dialect.
building flaw.
World building flaw
Yeah,
and the
well,
dialee. The
yeah,
idea, which I don't buy, and that's where the flaw comes in, is that the dialee remove the memories of or perceptions of everyone who finds out. The fact that Ba Sing Se is the most ridiculously huge city in the
yeah,
world, but it's like continental size. It's insane. It's not believable. There's no way in hell it wouldn't
no,
get found. But what is more believable is the fact that no one wants to talk about it,
that's
because of the
true, I
dialee
suppose.
and because of the fact that it's not our problem.
And it's also not as though it's not as though everyone is trying to get there. It's mainly
Mm.
just refugees who like really have nowhere else to go. Like if your town is still kind of like up and running, you're not trying to get to Bossing Say.
But yeah, you're right. It is a flaw in the show, and something you
Yeah.
kind of have to work around in your head. One of those headcanon moments.
We got another question
Yeah,
from
from
Savage Acorn. Is being a bender hereditary or question mark? And the answer is we don't 100% know the answer to that.
yeah.
Um, I,
I
I,
suppose it
it,
has to
well,
be because otherwise there would be more airbenders. There wouldn't be.
but what we know for without question is that to me it's very much like magic in Harry Potter, where there's just no good explanation. There's no proper explanation for it. Um, but we know the only thing that we know is that if you're a bender, you're born with the ability. Why is it doesn't seem to be purely hereditary. Neither of Katara, like it takes like Katara and Toph are two of the most powerful benders ever. Neither of their parents neither of them had parents who demonstrated ability, or even family lineages that were mentioned to have waterbenders in them. Um,
Of that power, yeah, definitely.
and everybody except for Ursa, who married into the Fire Nation, that we've met at any rate, is a firebender. Ozai even commented to the fact in one of the comic books, which we can get into the canonicity of that, but that he wasn't sure Zuko was a firebender when he was first born, and how this would have been a mark of great shame for a prince of the Fire Nation's firstborn not to be a bender. So there is the expectation, I suppose, that if you come from like a long line, that you will be or have a better chance at the very least. And very curiously, at least in my opinion, the biggest question of all, there are a pair of actually in the next episode we're going to meet them in the Fortune Teller. The next episode we review in our podcast, there are a pair of twins, identical twins, one of whom is an Earthbender, the other of whom is not. So we don't have a great explanation for all this, basically.
Like I say, all we know is that it happens at birth. You are assigned the potential at birth for whatever reason, whether that's biological and it's hereditary as in with real life traits, or for example, something far out there, spirits look at people as they're born and decide you can be a bender, you can be a bender, you can be a bender. You're backing it like that. Sounds ridiculous, and I don't think is the actual way. But that is there's no way to disprove that given the content of the show itself. It could just be as simple as you're spiritually connected at birth to a certain element, or not at all.
Right. And you mentioned a little bit of this before I talked over you. I didn't mean to. But at the start of it, you mentioned that the only nation we have where everyone is a bender is the air nomads. And that is explicitly stated, not in the show, but in Avatar extras, which are considered canon, which are tidbits or factoids of information that would play alongside the episode and during repeat views after the fact. Um, we do know that is directly stated to be a result of the spirituality of that culture. So, but it's the only one like that where
and
everybody is.
no one was born into it after the eradication of everyone who was one. So, do you need to have parents or at least a hereditary lineage with that potential? But even from that perspective, presumably there are people who of their generation weren't airbenders that had airbenders in their family history that had the gene hasn't re-emerged yet. So we don't really know. It's not something that has been explained, and it's not something I think that really needs explaining outside of just
Oh
common
no, no,
curiosity.
no! It's like magic in Harry
Yeah.
Potter, but it's something that you do think about. Does
Mm.
it break the story? No. Do we have a great answer? Not really. Um, and they broach the topic in different ways to the point that you're almost forced to wonder about it and try to rationalize it,
Mm.
even though there's no concrete way of doing that.
Mm. Midichlorians.
But those are hereditary,
Yeah.
so or at least they often are. It can skip a generation on occasion. Um,
Aang's spiritual journey with the guru and opening his chakras. What are our thoughts on it? I don't want to talk about that now because that will be
why
something
don't
that's
we just
heavily
wait?
covered when we
That's
get to the
that's
episode.
the whole episode of the
Yeah.
Guru. Like when we talk about it, we'll cover it. We promise.
Yeah, we will do triple jiggle. Great name. Hello, Skywalker. To Skywalker.
Do you think the population of Bender would be low after the war? Oh, I'm sorry.
Overall population
Oh,
of benders in the world, I think, have been lowered by the war. Probably. But we don't know for sure. Like I say, it could just be a case the next generation's born and a bunch of people just recap it. Maybe there's an
I think.
actual limit of how many
Well,
overall there
it
can be.
it's definite in the sense that before the war, all of the nations were thriving, and after the war, the air nomads were completely decimated. The Southern Water Tribe was diminished down to basically nothing, save Hama and Katara. And the Earth Kingdom certainly lost a lot of Earthbenders because they put on the most continuous war front for 100 years. The
The only
Northern
war
Water
front,
Tribe
really,
probably not so much.
in the grand scheme.
Yeah, yeah. It's the only consistent one for sure.
Mm.
So yeah, it definitely would be lower, but that doesn't mean that it won't resurface or rebuild.
Yeah.
By any means.
There doesn't seem to be a chronic lack of benders in Korra's era. Let's put it that way.
Not at all. Not at all.
In fact, there are so many that they're causing equality problems, supposedly. So,
Which is fine. It just should have been built up to a little bit more, but especially because it could have made Amon the greatest villain of all time, definitively, instead of just almost there. At least in all time in Avatar land.
Mm.
But yeah, so guys, we've been doing this for like, I don't know, 2.5 hours now. We're gonna have to wrap it up here. So if anybody has, like one more question, we might be able to answer that one as long as it's not too much. Here's one. Would you guys like a series of anthology episodes focused on various characters spanning from Wan's time to Legend of Korra? I would love that. That would be great.
As well, there's such an expanse of time that you could tell a story without damaging or even affecting any of the previous following kind of events in the series. There are so many different stories you could tell with so many different characters for the Avatar. Not even the Avatar, just other people in the world at different eras.
Yeah, and even without the second part, sort of cementing Wan's place as like like an important linchpin in the series continuity. His first part plays out almost like an anthology episode anyway. So you could see how beautiful those kinds of stories could be, where it's just like this Avatar is living like Aladdin, and like this is his life. This guy is not an Avatar; he's just a random person, like or this person knew Kyoshi and had an adventure with her, what have you. You could go anywhere with it. That'd be great.
Especially considering we see the era he's in. He dies very much on a huge war front for the visuals.
Yeah.
And also he's the first. We don't know how the cycle was adopted or into the world's consciousness, how it went from being this completely new, what the hell is this situation, to, oh yeah, of course, it's the Avatar, it's a cycle every day. How that was adopted politically and culturally would be fascinating to see, and how it affects people who don't have hundreds of years of history to back them. There's one guy talking to me in my head that's telling me I have this great destiny. The first time that happens, that's a story that needs telling, in my opinion, or should be great if it is told.
And especially because Korra sort of showed that maybe the creators aren't the best with huge overarching or interconnected stories.
Biggest flaw of
Because they
Korra in
have
my mind.
everybody has, I think, one good. If you're lucky, you have many, but maybe if you're lucky, you have one truly great interconnected like web or tapestry going on, and that was the original one that they wanted to tell. Korra, we'll get into this. It didn't. It wasn't necessarily a total outgrowth of their own passion. Like it was a project that Nickelodeon asked them to make. And even though I think they did tremendous, beautiful things with it, not 100% of the way. So it might be even better for them just to have like the beautiful animation, music, and world that they created present for something like an anthology. That would be awesome.
Excellent. Very true. Because that's
I
the main...
really,
Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, I really think that's a great question to end on. Actually,
I agree. It's a good conclusion. Our thoughts on the series and what could be done moving forward, because we presume there will be more at some point from this series.
yeah.
I'm not sure they can go much beyond Korra's era for reasons we've discussed and probably bring up in the future videos.
I
But
mean,
at least not without some dramatic changes in the style. But yeah, there's such copious amounts of stories I could tell before Aang's era. So many.
yeah. But thanks for joining us on this stream, guys. We had a lot of fun doing it. This was actually like a lot more entertaining for me to participate in than I thought it would be. These were some really good questions.
Yeah, I like the fact that we can share with the fact that we do go on and on for hours and hours talking about different topics as well, because we've had like 8 hour discussions off camera
Oh yeah,
that never get shown.
yeah,
So it's good to be able to
yeah,
share some of that sort of live discussion.
yeah. And we've got a lot more planned for you guys, and we are doing the best, everything in our power to give you an actual podcast this coming Wednesday, where we'll return with the fortune teller.
Yes, looking forward to talking about that with you on Wednesday. So yeah, this has been our second live stream, first Avatar live stream. Hopefully more will come soon in the future. Hope you've enjoyed. I am Reti4, and I still don't have an outro.
Yes, he does. That's it. I'm Greyjedi 91, but you guys already know that. Take care, guys.
Goodbye, guys.